Like, it's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
And one here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Saturday morning. Loads to talk about, including to a Labour MP in just a second. Callum Anderson joins us for the first time. He is the Labour MP for Buckingham and Bletchley. His party's in crisis. His Prime Minister's under pressure. And the welfare bill, well, is it actually going to go through on Tuesday? The government's also talking about saying that when you go to a hospital, you should rate it and they will get money depending on those ratings. What do you think of that? Non-crime hate incidents up. The Sun is reporting that. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll also talk about whether the BBC should actually televise Kneecap. That is the band, one of their members charged with a terror offence, who are playing at Glastonbury later on today. We'll talk to our debate desk about all of that as well. We'll also talk about reparations, because Jamaica is pushing the King to back reparations. What do you think about this? This is the idea that because of the evils of slavery, that we should pay back Jamaica and other countries with money. Well, where's the money actually going to come from? We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We'll also talk, not just about Kneecap, but Palestine Action as well. They've got a plan, apparently, to attack more RAF bases. They're going to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation very, very soon. Also, if you're going on holiday, there is a new rule that says that you can't be charged, or it's probably coming in regard to charging for cabin bags. That's going to be a big, big change. We'll talk to Simon Calder about that a little bit later on. As always, I want to hear your views on all the topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, and we'll play out as many of those as we can. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000, as I say, is the main number. Stay with us here on Talk. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Well, Stephen's been in touch already. He says Kneecap should not have been allowed anywhere near a public stage, though when our capital city allows a weekly anti-Semitic march. The standards in this country are atrocious. The BBC proudly broadcast them is only more evidence that they should have no access whatsoever to public money. Well, what do you think about this? Tell us your thoughts on Kneecap. 0344 499 1000. There are charges in that criminal case, and we will, of course, be careful about that. We absolutely do not want to prejudice a trial. But are you, as a licence fee payer, happy that NECAP would be televised by the BBC later on today? It'll be very interesting to see what actually happens when they take to the stage at Glastonbury at 4 o'clock. Right then, I want to talk now about all things political. Keir Starmer still under pressure. Big changes, of course, to the welfare bill. The government also proposing today that if you go to a hospital, you should give it a rating. You should give feedback, and actually some of the money that could go to the hospital may be held back if their rating isn't high enough. Well, is that a good idea? Is that reasonable? Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, says that he's going to put more power into the hands of patients. We're actually going to be talking to him tomorrow, and we will talk about that. So let's talk now to Callum Anderson, the Labour MP for Buckingham and Bletchley. Callum, you're very welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining me this morning. It's been a tough week for Keir Starmer. Are you going to vote for this bill on Tuesday? Are you happy with the changes that have now been made?
Well, good morning, Peter. It's really nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting me to your show. And for what it's worth, I totally agree with you on Glastonbury. I can't think of anything worse, but I know lots of people go. With regards to your question...
I can't think of anything worse than Glastonbury either, so we're both happily not at Glastonbury this weekend anyway, Callum.
With regards to your question, yes, I will be voting for the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill on Tuesday. The reason being that I recognise that there is a huge need for reform of our social security system. I'm very conscious that the 1 in 8 young people are out of work, that we've got, since from 2019, 2020, we've had a rising number of people who are claiming for personal independence payment. And I think it's our moral duty as a government, regardless of what colour, but I think of this particular government, as well as, frankly, an economic imperative to do all we can to, yes, of course, protect the most vulnerable, and ensure that those who have, for whatever reason, whatever health condition or disability that they have, ensuring that we are protecting them and that they aren't required to undergo demeaning regular assessment. But those who can work are given the possibility and the opportunity to do so.
A lot of people are worried, Callum, that this bill will actually take away a lot of money from people. You've received, and other MPs as well, of course, in the Labour Party, received late-night assurances from Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, that current people who receive the personal independence payment, including some of our viewers and listeners, they will be fine. Nothing will change with this legislation, but it will change in November 2026. So if in October 2026 you have, for example, you're given personal independence payment, you're given PIP, and then after this change, let's say a month later in December 2026, you have exactly the same conditions, you have exactly the same ability to look after yourself or inability to look after yourself, you won't get the same level of PIP. That's not fair, is it, Callum?
Well, obviously, as you're very aware, I think, having kind of covered it over the last few days on your show, there's also been lots of conversations between ministers and the Parliamentary Labour Party. One of the concerns that had been received loud and clear, I think, by ministers, and as you say, rightly say, I've received representations from my own constituents, including just yesterday, Thursday, my constituents Eva Advice Surgery. People who are already claiming personal independent payment, either themselves or a family member, wanting that certainty. From my understanding, when there'll be a written ministerial statement on Monday that will give.
But what's proposed, Callum? Just straightforwardly, what is proposed is that at one stage you get a higher PIP, and at one stage you get a lower PIP because of this legislation, because of this change. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's important that we give people certainty who are receiving PIP now, but also ahead of November 2026, we are giving people a simplified, clearer framework for understanding
and less money.
How they will be able to claim for PIP.
But we'll get less money.
Yeah.
I mean, is that fair that they get less money?
Well, I think it's important that we give people a really clear, simplified framework for what for when they will, if those who will claim PEP.
Okay, Keir Starmer is actually giving his speech at the Welsh Labour conference in Llandudno at the moment. Just want to hear a little bit of that. Let's just hear 30 seconds of that and then I'll go back to Callum.
Carolyn and Joe, my colleagues and my friends, who fought for Wales every step of the way, making sure that the people of Wales are at the forefront of what we're doing in Westminster. Because, conference, let me tell you, in everything I do, on home or on the world stage, I know who I am fighting for. I know who's in my mind's eye, the important thing in politics. The Welsh workers that I speak to at businesses like Airbus in Broughton, or the Breckfast Forest wind farm, the communities I visited on the campaign trail last year, from Abergavenny to Carmarthen. Because let me tell you this, the world is changing around us. We've entered a new era. That's in defence, in trade, in industry, in technology. In fact, across the board. Change that
That's Keir Starmer speaking at the Welsh Conservative conference in Llandudno. He's had a hell of a week and has U-turned 3, possibly 4 times if you look into what he said in regard to his speech about being an island of strangers as well. What do you make of Keir Starmer's leadership? Has he been a good Prime Minister over the last year? Because, Callum, I'll just tell you, there are quite a number of our viewers and listeners who really think he's not providing any leadership at the moment.
I'm very aware of that. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Llandudno, as my grandfather used to spend the last 40 years of his life very nearby. I think Keir Starmer has been a really, really strong Prime Minister. I think he inherited a situation that was incredibly difficult, both from an economic perspective and a geopolitical perspective. I think when we think about what his leadership has done on the putting Britain much more confidently and firmly on the world stage, I think he's done a really, really good job there. Certainly when it comes to making sure that Europe is moving as one with regards to NATO and defence spending. And I think on the domestic front, as I say, we inherited a really challenging position from the previous government. And I don't think anyone would say that we haven't had bumps on the way, but I think that's the nature of returning to government after such a long period.
He's had quite a lot of bumps on the way, and there's a senior cabinet minister quoted in the Times this morning saying that he or she has had a big, perhaps the thought about another leader. I mean, that's pretty astonishing given that you're not even a year into a Labour government. You've had all these U-turns, you've an open backbench revolt this week, and you've a leader who a lot of people think isn't leading, including your colleagues, some of your colleagues on the Labour backbenches.
Well, that is not a characterisation, or a view rather, that I recognise among my colleagues in the Parliamentary Labour Party. Obviously, I don't know.
Do they think he led on welfare this week, Callum? Do they think he led on welfare? I think he was being led.
I would say, with regards to the Cabinet Minister, he or she are very welcome to declare themselves publicly rather than kind of brief anonymously. I think, with regards to your kind of latter questions, I think the fact that he has been willing, along with his cabinet, to listen to the Parliamentary Labour Party when they have concerns, for example, on the welfare reforms, that, as many other of your previous guests have said, is a really knotty issue and a really emotive issue, not only for members of Parliament.
Well, you're absolutely right, Callum. And what's interesting is that, listening is something he's certainly done from Wednesday, but prior to that, he presented this plan. He talked about the criticism of it being noises off, and then capitulated on Thursday night and changed his mind quite expensively and quite significantly. So shouldn't he have just listened before?
My experience is that he has been listening throughout this parliamentary term. So I think with the ministerial statement in regards to welfare specifically that we'll see on Monday will reflect the fact that he and others have been listening to Labour members of Parliament who've had very understandable concerns about the proposed welfare reforms.
What do you think about this plan that Wes Streeting, we're going to talk to him tomorrow on my programme, in regard to hospital funding being tied to patient ratings in an overhaul of the NHS? Is this a good idea?
So I'll be honest with you, I haven't, but I'm not on top of all the detail of that proposed plan. What I will say, however, is, for over the kind of last 18 months as a candidate and then as a member of Parliament, I received both by email and in face to face lots of feedback from my constituents about the state of both primary care services, healthcare services, and experiences at our local hospital. And I'm in Bletchley right now, and obviously our local hospital is Milton Keynes University Hospital. I think actually the idea that there is a stronger connection, stronger feedback loop between patients and the Department for Health and Social Care and those who are supporting the funding delivery models, I think is a very compelling one. I think we should, those who are delivering healthcare services should know the quality of the healthcare that they're providing, and who better than their patients.
OK, Callum, thanks for speaking to us this morning. That's Callum Anderson there. He's the Labour MP for Buckingham and Bletchley. Let's hear just a little bit more of Keir Starmer. He is in Llandudno at the Welsh Labour conference right now.
800 military homes in Wales, so our heroes have the homes that they deserve. So yes, conference, we will keep our country safe. We will build on our strengths here at home. And that, of course, is what our modern industrial strategy is all about. We launched it earlier this week. It was a really proud moment for all of us, a turning point for the UK and Wales, a new relationship between business and government.
Well, as the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, speaking to the Welsh Labour conference. We'll monitor that. If he says anything of any interest, of course, we will tell you. He's talking to the Labour Party faithful there in Llandudno. Thank you to Jane, who says Welsh Labour have failed Wales. The Prime Minister is talking nonsense. People can't wait till the next election in May. Jez in Sussex says Callum Anderson, another Labourite who has drunk the Starmer Party Kool-Aid, says Jez in Sussex. Well, listen, he's loyal and he's an MP, and that's often they just say what they're told to say, and that's fine, I suppose. Dawn in Chelmsford says, of course, people who need financial support for disabilities should receive it, but I do feel that we should also be aware that taxpayers ultimately fund it. Affordability is a major problem, says Dawn in Chelmsford. I think you're absolutely right. James says Starmer is the worst PM ever. And on Kneecap, Penny in Essex says, they're a disgrace. A woman is in prison for 31 months for writing stuff which was stupid, but she didn't deserve that. But these talentless morons actually said kill your local MP, which is, in Penny's view, inciting murder and walking free. Well, there are charges in another matter, which is a terrorism charge. We'll not talk about that because we don't want to prejudice the trial. But Penny says, I despair at the woke and snowflake police service we have. It is madness. Ian is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I think Ian wants to talk about this hospital funding plan, this NHS overhaul. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
I did listen intently to your previous guest. This plan will not work. It will not work. It's just rehashed old Thatcherism. In 1997, when Blair came in, there was a survey taken at all NHS staff because I was a nurse and I was widowed by medical incompetence and I was a whistleblower. So I've got a foot in both camps here.
I'm so sorry to hear that happened
It's
to
a
you.
long time ago now,
Okay,
but I'm just trying to give you my background.
Sure, of course.
The survey was taken from a sceptical staff, and what these characters did, Milburn and Blair, is bend it, and instead wasted billions on a failed computer program. That's what happened.
Now we're in a position a number of years on from that where there is a proposal to say the kind of care you receive, even if it's just going into A&E or whatever, you're in a position where you can give feedback on that, and that funding for hospitals could actually be linked to that. Do you think that is something that we should at least consider?
That's Major's Patients Charter, and all that led was an increase of real violence against staff because they were given an idea what they thought they were entitled to or could do, but that didn't match the reality, and that's why it was scrapped by Frank Dobson.
Okay.
Now, what's happening is whistleblowers are hunted down. There's an escalated NHS negligence bill, probably bigger than some small island states as their own income. Rogue managers are protected. Decades of reports saying the same thing, but nothing is ever done.
Okay.
It's ever ignored. And every NHS reform since the 1970s has produced less for more, and just basically it's like putting treacle inside a car engine.
Ian, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate you speaking to us this morning. What do you think about what Ian said, and indeed what Callum Anderson said, the Labour MP for Buckingham and Bletchley, who joined me a few minutes ago? Let me know your thoughts on all of these. Glenn in Colchester says, good morning, Peter. You can hear the hesitation and trepidation in Callum's voice. This truce will last no longer than an Israeli-Hamas one. Starmer won't last the year out, even after he removes Reeves, says Glenn in Colchester. Simon in Canterbury says, good morning, Cardi P. Another fantastic plan by this failing government. A hospital that doesn't deliver an acceptable performance due to understaffing or lack of equipment will be penalised by having funding withheld. How is this going to help? How? Simon says, Simon, I think that's a fair point, and actually there is this worry that some hospitals that are bad anyway will get worse, some that are doing well will get better because everyone thinks they're marvellous. Also, are we in a position to give a very fair view? Some people will say, oh, the NHS, oh, it's all wonderful and they're all heroes and angels and marvellous and wonderful. Well, guess what? Quite a lot of people who work in the NHS are marvellous and wonderful, and quite a lot of them aren't. Some of them are as lazy as sin, and we should not lionise them at all. And I think we lost the run of ourselves with the NHS, particularly during COVID, banging pans in our front doors. But how will it improve, and how will it be better, and will that feedback actually be taken on board? Will anything really change, especially if they've less money to change it? Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to our debate desk panel about this and many other matters in just a minute.
1 year
to send all the terrorists and scumbags off to. We need to resurrect something like that, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's an Ascension Island or in the middle of nowhere. That's what we need, because frankly, whether it's the asylum seekers, the bogus asylum seekers who are almost exclusively fighting age men coming over here, or whether it's any of the other wrong-uns that we've got in this country, I don't know about you, I am so tired of having to live around these people. I want them deported, I want them arrested, and I want us to go back to having a nice, calm, civilised society again.
they promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe.
Our work is urgent.
And we
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mark in Selby, who's been in touch. He says, when you have Labour MPs supporting Palestine action, surely Keir has to get shot of his members who support a group aligning to sabotage terrorist acts towards the armed forces. How can he dodge that question like he has many others? Now, this is not talking about Callum, it must be said, the MP we were talking about earlier, but actually Richard Bergen, who I spoke to yesterday. It's going around social media. We'll play a little bit of that in a second. To do nothing makes him a risk to the nation's security, more so than by not stopping the flotilla invasion. Well, I'm sure Richard Bergen absolutely denies supporting any form of terrorism or terrorists or being a risk to the nation's security. What we do know, of course, is that I asked him on a number of occasions yesterday, and Mark is responding to that. Certainly it's on my Twitter, and we'll play a little bit of it actually just in a second, to Richard Bergen, the Labour MP for Leeds East, I think, who failed to condemn Palestine action, those people who broke into RAF Bryce Norton, and well, certainly we know there have been arrests in this. I want to be careful about what I say about that, but no charges brought yet, so we're free to discuss it still. But what we do know is that they did it. The Palestine Action Group did it. They filmed it. They put it online, and in fact we probably wouldn't even be talking about it had we not that footage that they gave us. Peter in Croydon says, morning Peter, although I'm happy I'm not paying the bias BBC licence fee anymore, I think it's a disgrace to even allow kneecap near a stage for their Kill Your Local MP remark. We do know that there's a terrorist charge in another matter in regard to kneecap. We'll keep away from that because there are charges there. Gary in Shrewsbury says the problem with the welfare state is it's easy for people to get money from it. That's the main problem, and this MP that you had on earlier, along with the rest of Labour, don't seem to want to recognise that. And Trevor in Harrow says, good morning Peter, I hear that Keith Starmer, not Keir Starmer, but Keith Starmer, is up for the Hugh Turner Prize this year. Just wondering if you could confirm, says Trevor. Well, I suppose perhaps not an unmade bed, but there's certainly some chaos in the Labour Party anyway. Let's discuss that with Amy Fisher. She is a former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, and Mike Indian is with us too, the journalist and commentator. Good morning to you both.
Hi.
Great to see you. Keir Starmer, let's start with this, Mike. He's at the Welsh Labour conference at the moment, lucky him, in Llandudno. Whither Keir Starmer?
With a Keir Starmer, I mean, we are a week away from what would supposed to be Labour's great triumph, Peter, from that landslide German election victory, and yet this is shaping up to be the most embarrassing week for the Prime Minister in what's already been quite an embarrassing month, hasn't it? I mean, 120 of your own MPs signing a reasoned amendment in the Commons that to wreck your headline piece of welfare reform for what is, I mean, Amy and I were discussing this before we came on air, for a comparatively small amount of money.
Say 3 billion, isn't it?
It's a tiny amount.
It's a drop in the ocean, I think, was the phrase
in comparison to the whole government spending. Yeah, certainly.
And my concern is not just whether or not this undermines the authority of the Prime Minister and the government going forward, but also what this sets up within the parliamentary party, because so far Starmer's disciplinary tactics of removing the whip from a handful of fringe MPs, particularly from the Socialist campaign group, has proven to be quite effective, because these were the Jeremy Corbyn types that always were going to rebel. Going forward, though, if you have 120 of your own MPs, that's a quarter of the parliamentary party, that are willing to stand up and tell you are wrong, including veterans and select committee chairs, that means as a government, that majority, that huge 170 majority, is basically meaningless.
And then, as we were saying, sort of outside as well, doesn't even necessarily solve the problem for when all this comes back to Parliament on Tuesday. So not only is it the damage, as you've just described, in terms of sort of parliamentary authority amongst his own party for this relatively small amount of money in terms of sort of the spending of DWP, and indeed an even smaller drop in the ocean of government spending overall. But then when all of this is coming back on Tuesday, still not really clear that of all of those 120 who have kind of forced this U-turn, happened very late on, sort of Thursday night into Friday, that that actually any of the upset and unrest about the cuts to various welfare payments is going to have been completely solved by, the third U-turn that the PM has had to make this month. The other two obviously being over winter fuel payments and whether to hold an inquiry into the child sex grooming scandal. So, I don't think I'm being particularly political. I just think we both agree it's been a pretty screechingly bad month for the PM, and I'm not even saying that as a Conservative. I just think anybody can see that.
We've got a beleaguered Prime Minister less than a year after an election, a backbench revolt, looking a bit shaky, number of U-turns and key pieces of legislation that is struggling to get through. It all seems a little bit familiar.
Look, I knew where you were. I knew where you were going with that. Hence why I slightly had to head you off the
I should say, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, that Amy and I went through the fire of Theresa May and Brexit together.
But you guys didn't have a majority. Let's be honest here. You were in that period where you were trying to construct a majority. Keir Starmer has deconstructed his own majority.
Well, I wonder about a majority anymore because, look, Boris Johnson had an 80-strong majority. He had loads of problems. You've got Keir Starmer, who has a majority almost the size of Tony Blair. Actually, if you look at it comparatively and in terms of other parties and so on, it actually is basically the same. And he seems weaker than ever, Mike.
He does, and I think we can't let him off the fact that this Island of Strangers comment was also rowed back last night as well by Downing Street too. So,
well, it wasn't even that, it was him himself. He gave an interview to The Observer to his own biographer, a guy called Tom Baldwin, who's written his sort of authorised biography, and the Island of Strangers remark is something that Starmer himself said that he hadn't really read the speech beforehand. And fair enough, there were extenuating circumstances and his family home had just been firebombed at his car, so let's give him a little bit of a bye-ball for that. But there are a number of things in that fascinating interview in The Observer actually where he said, I regret this, I shouldn't have used these words, I shouldn't have done this, there's a U-turn on this, and you sort of think, you have agency here, Keir Starmer. You're meant to lead. We're looking to you for leadership, and we're not getting it.
Yeah, and worryingly, again, they're talking about replacing another chief of staff and reshuffling the structures inside Number 10.
Well, senior cabinet minister today quoted in the Times saying he wants to replace Keir Starmer.
And another minister in the Times also saying that they felt Rachel Reeves' position would be untenable, and their fates are inextricably linked. However long she lasts. I mean, this is just less than a week and a half after what should have been a triumphal spending review in terms of the 3% above funding increase for the NHS, the infrastructure investment that they were delivering on the core priorities. But next week, instead of celebrating this landmark moment for what should be this Labour government's first lap of triumph, they're going to be asking questions about whether or not the Prime Minister will still be around in 12 months.
It's a bizarre situation. Will the Prime Minister be around in 12 months? Do you think, Amy, with your political nous and experience?
I just wanted to go back to the sort of Island of Strangers and the apology, which actually is sort of a non-apology. I totally take your point, the extenuating circumstances of the firebomb and how frightening that must have been for Sir Keir Starmer and his family. But he sort of went a bit further. He went, well, sort of, I didn't really understand the phrase, and somebody had written the speech for me, and my speechwriters didn't really understand it. So
it's their job.
It's a layer. So that's exactly what I was going to do. So it's a layer of sort of I don't want to actually say chaos because that gets bandied around sort of too often in politics, but you can't expect one person, the PM, to literally know everything all of the time. That's slightly separate from your point about leadership, actually. But let's just be human about it. You can't expect one person to know everything all the time. However, that is why you have a team around you, which is to your point about, well, are there going to be structural changes within Number 10? Because you as the PM, it then is your job, firstly, to lead the country, but then secondarily to put in people, and that layer below you,
who you trust and will do the right thing,
and have the support, and for them to have the judgment and stuff. So that bit about the speech and the Island of Strangers comment was so indicative to me of this wider problem of it just doesn't really look like anyone knows who's going on, and that's not heaping it all on one man.
No.
The PM.
Although the buck has to stop somewhere.
Yes, the buck does have to stop with somewhere, but let's give the man some grace and some understanding where it's due. But in all of this, it doesn't really seem that anybody sort of is quite in charge or has the grip.
I don't feel there's any grip.
And in the context of it not having even been quite a a year yet. So that to me is a scary bit, which is, and I'm really trying not to play politics here, because it would be very frankly easy for me at the moment to just fling brickbats. But that's actually not what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is it all feels very shaky and sort of built a bit on sand, and then that's the worrying bit actually for the country.
Addy in Adlington says, I just heard Starmer speaking in Wales. Am I living in a parallel universe? I think I'll have a lie down, says Addy. Well, that's fine as long as you keep the radio or TV on. Georgina in Glendunno says, I just wonder if Starmer has brought his flip-flops to Glendunno. Well done, you win text of the day, and it is only 10:35. And one person says, why is Mike Indian wearing a hat during a conversation on Talk? Let's get the answer to the big question. Why is Mike Indian wearing a hat?
I always wear the hat. The listeners and I have this long-standing, debate about whether I'm going to wear the hat or not, and I don't want to disappoint the fans. To let them have it as well.
Keep the people happy.
Keep the people happy, or keep them infuriated, as it may be. At least they're talking about
I don't know if this person is happy or unhappy. Maybe they like the hat. I just want to know why they're wearing the hat. So there's no real reason. You just wear a hat.
I just wear the hat. It's just my thing.
Fair enough.
I just like the hat.
Okay. There we are. Well, that is an answer to your question, and let me tell you, there is nothing that we are afraid to ask on this programme. And indeed, Richard Bergen was someone I asked a question a similar number of times, actually, quite a few times yesterday, to try to get an answer for him. He's the Labour MP for Leeds East, on Palestine Action. We're going to be talking about them in a second, and NECAP as well, people who appear to support those who would do us harm. They may deny that, certainly, but certainly Gaza is a big issue that they're talking about, and I think there are many questions about Palestine Action, which is about to be prescribed, actually, as a terrorist group by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. They've talked about intifada in prisons. They've talked about further action, further what they call direct action as well. We'll be careful because there are some arrests there, but we can still talk about it. It's absolutely fine to do so until there are charges, and then there are legal problems. But I just want to replay a little bit in a minute or two of what Richard Bergen said to me yesterday. Maybe you missed it, maybe you've seen a bit of it online, and get the reaction of Mike and Amy to that, as well as talking about NECAP, who are going to be playing at Glastonbury later on today. Will the BBC show it? It'll be very interesting to find out. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for your company and everyone who's been in touch, including on Twitter. Kathleen says, Mr Anderson, Callum Anderson, the MP we spoke to a little bit earlier, needs to get out more and see what this useless Prime Minister and this disastrous government has done. We can't survive the next few years with this bunch of idiots. And Lady Anne says, Keir saying in a speech, we will keep our country safe. What planet is he on? And Leslie on text, 87222, with the word talk in your text. Hi Peter, Starmer should have stood up to the rebels and did what Boris did when he threw his Brexit rebels out of the party. Well, in fairness to Keir Starmer, not on this particular issue, but he has got rid of a few people, like John McDonnell, for example. Someone who believes a lot of the things that John McDonnell believes is Richard Bergen, the former Shadow Justice Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn. He spoke to me yesterday and I asked him about Palestine Action. Now, they are a group that is due to be proscribed very soon. That means they'll be deemed a terrorist organisation in the UK. The Home Secretary is going to do that. They're the group. Now, there are arrests have been made on this. Arrests were made yesterday. But what they did, what Palestine Action as a group did, was they broke into RAF Bryce Norton and they put spray paint on planes in RAF Bryce Norton. Now, a lot of those planes will have to, they put it into the engine, for example, so they'll have to be cleaned. Engineers will have to go through them. It'll take a long time and a lot of expense to actually fix that. There have been some arrests in that, and police are looking into that at the moment. But you can see on the screen at the moment, if you're looking, this wasn't just graffitiing, this was putting this spray paint into the actual engine itself. So I asked Richard Bergen yesterday, we spoke about a number of things including welfare, but on this particular point of Palestine Action, I asked him very simply whether what they did in his view was to be condemned. Now, he didn't answer that question. I then moved on, rephrased the question slightly and said, well, would you say what they did was right or what they did was wrong? This is what happened. Palestine Action is a non-violent group. I mean, they broke into RAF Bryce Norton and caused a lot of apparent criminal damage. You don't seem to be condemning them.
Well, this goes to the very point I'm trying to make, though. You just referred to them carrying out criminal damage. And I think it was notable that in the Home Secretary's statement about her intention to prescribe this organisation, Palestine Action, a word that kept appearing again and again was criminal act, criminal act. Well, criminal acts can be prosecuted under the criminal law. So even those opposed to such tactics should see, in my opinion, that prescribing Palestine Action, treating them as terrorists, is a dangerous step. And I'll tell you why. Because what you could end up with is constituents of mine and others who aren't members of Palestine Action or any group could end up facing potential legal action.
Although Palestine Action itself, Richard, has said that in a meeting accessed by the Telegraph newspaper, that resistance lives on the streets in cities and towns and in prison, and says that they're spreading intifada in prison. You haven't condemned Palestine Action, and I'm going to give you another opportunity to condemn the criminal acts that they did. Can you just condemn them?
Well, criminal acts can be dealt with by the criminal courts. And what
do you condemn them?
What worries me?
Do you condemn what happened to RAF Bryce Norton?
Well, there's a tradition, isn't there, in this country, a country that prides itself on civil liberties, of these issues being dealt with through the criminal courts, and sometimes juries acquit people. They acquitted the Greenham Common women in relation to...
Okay, let me ask you in a different way. Do you think it was wrong for Palestine Action to break into RAF Bryce Norton and use, as they put on their own social media channels, they filmed it, they did it, they've been straight out there saying this happened. In fact, we may not even have known about it had they not told us. Were they right or wrong to do that?
Well, that can be put before the criminal court.
What do you think?
The question you're asking me...
The question I'm asking you is it right or wrong?
Well, they take direct action, which I don't take, in relation to trying to stop the genocide.
Can you just say yes or no? Can you just say the words right or wrong? What do you think?
Well, I'm sure you're enjoying this part of the show, but
not really. I just want an answer. I would have enjoyed it a heck of a lot more if he just said, give me an answer, and then I could have asked him about many of the other things that I wanted to talk to him about. Amy, what do you make of that?
That was really painful. Because that's the thing, like, either say yes or no and then defend your position either way, but the being on the hook and the wiggling around in that was what sort of gave me this second-hand anxiety about it all. And look at the point I wanted to make about a group being prescribed. I mean, I used to work in the Home Office. Like, it's actually a pretty high bar that you have to get to for that to happen. So,
and just to say, I mean, you say you used to work at the Home Office. You were the principal advisor on counter-terrorism to the Home Secretary. You were in Cobra. You were making serious decisions about counter-terrorism in this country. You know this stuff backwards. So tell us your thoughts on Palestine Action.
That's a bit of a direct question. Oh my God, you're going to make me challenge my inner Bergen here by now, twisting around a little bit. No. So I think the fact that the current Home Secretary has been very clear about what she thinks should happen to this group. I mean, we should take that as meaning that it's gone beyond a level of what Mr. Bergen was trying to say was it's civil action that courts can take care of, and then comparing it to the women protesting against Greenham Common, protesting against nuclear warfare. I mean, it's just frankly insulting, right? So I think he was so confused in his own argument. That's probably why he wouldn't say yes or no. To go back to the point of, if he said yes, then he can defend his point. If he said no, then defend his point. And then to sort of try and turn it back that you were making some kind of journalistic ploy about, oh, you must be enjoying this. It's like, no one's enjoying this, Mr. Bergen. We're all finding it very, very painful that you just won't say yes or no.
Just give us an answer. Kneecap are the band that are going to be playing at Glastonbury later on. Mike, the BBC in a quandary. Should they show it? Should they not show it? Clearly, well, it would be completely unsurprising if they said or did something about Gaza, said something. Of course, obviously, there are a lot of people at Glastonbury have very strong feelings on this. What do you think the BBC should do?
I think they should show the set, but just make sure they can cut away if anything starts to happen. I mean, what they shouldn't do is, we learned this a lot with, the coverage of Donald Trump's rallies in the US, is not air this stuff uncritically. I mean, you'll remember very well in 2017 the speech Jeremy Corbyn gave at Glastonbury, which felt like a victory rally in the wake of that election as well. So Glastonbury
did win the argument.
It lost by 100,000 votes though. For me, this is primarily, as long as it's primarily a musical performance, there's no issue showing it. The moment it becomes a political statement, they should cut away from it. This is the point, that they have to exercise control, they have to exercise judgment in what is shown on a publicly funded state-funded broadcaster with that editorial independence, and the BBC has had its editorial judgment questioned numerously. Its Glastonbury coverage is still held up as some of the best that it does. I mean, a lot of people were very upset that Neil Young didn't want his set being broadcast as well. I don't think many people would be upset if they cut away from Kneecap due to making a political statement. I think that would show discretion and judgment, which a lot of the BBC has been claimed to be lacking by some people in the right-wing media, I would say.
Yes, very, very interesting thoughts there, and I wonder in regard to Neil Young whether that was the right decision for him. What do you think, Mike? For what it's worth,
I have to say, absolutely not. I think it's totally with not wanting corporations behind it. Yeah, this is the most prominent music festival in the country. It's a great, and also one of the great things about Glastonbury is, although you can go and see it, it is shown. It's this great showcase of musical talent as well. And I think it gives a lot of people a great deal of pleasure, and it's why they pay their licence fee to some degree to sit down and watch it. And the same along with sport, and it's part of the plethora that the BBC should be bringing to it. It shouldn't be for individual artists to decide whether or not their sets are broadcast. It should be down to the BBC.
Should the BBC show Kneecap, Amy?
My issue with Kneecap is, leaving aside their ongoing legal difficulties, their music just isn't very good. And then I was having this conversation with actually my mother yesterday about sort of what the controversy is and why there's this band called Kneecap, and why they have these legal difficulties. And I explained sort of all of this, and then there was this great pause. And my mother at the end just went, "But darling, didn't you like a band called Elbow a few years ago?" And that's kind of where the conversation ended, because I just sort of didn't quite know what to do after that. But
there's a joke to be made about you washing your hair with Head and Shoulders at some point.
Here we go. We could keep on giving.
Keep going. Leslie says, when Starmer made the Island of Strangers speech, I thought at last he gets how the country feels, only for him now to apologise in regard to saying it. Well, Dorothy from East Kilbride, she's been in touch as well, says, "Morning, Peter. Keir Starmer regrets his speech, saying we are becoming an island of strangers is wrong. If he had said we are an island of strangers, I would have agreed with the statement for the first time. I would also like to add, Lucy Connolly regretted her tweet. Did she receive forgiveness?" says Dorothy in East Kilbride. Lots more to discuss still. The front page of The Sun as well. This'll drive you mad. Cops waste time probing a man for singing Flower of Scotland at an England railway station. This is non-crime hate incidents raising their ugly head once again. A gay man said that he was being discriminated against because his bins were moved. Yes, really. Stay with us here on Talk.
Let's have a look at what you've done. Your two-tier justice means that someone who's sent a hurty tweet is in prison for longer than someone who's a convicted paedophile. Taxes are up, debts are up, borrowing's up, inflation's up, unemployment's up. Factories in places like Stoke-on-Trent are shutting due to Ed Miliband's disastrous net zero agenda, and the economy at best is stagnant. All haunted by that Halloween budget that has wide repercussions across the country. I think we all know we're pretty sick and tired of this first year with Keir.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're on the debate desk. This is Cardi P with you until 1 o'clock. Thanks so much for your company. Let me know all your thoughts on all the things we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Get your voice on the air. Let's have a chat about what's in the news, including on the front page of The Sun today. Police across Britain stand accused of failing to tackle actual crimes while instead investigating hate complaints. Non-crime hate incidents have reared their ugly head once again, including one about a pub landlord who stopped a transgender woman using his ladies' loo. One force probed concerns about a man singing the national anthem, singing the anthem, I should say, Flower of Scotland at a Carlisle railway station. Cops also logged a case after a caller put on an Indian accent to order a chicken tikka masala from a takeaway. Another force was contacted by a person whose new boss called their designer clothes fake. That's a non-crime hate incident apparently, and told them of an intimate Where's Wally tattoo. Well, let's find out what Amy Fisher thinks about this. Just a complete waste of everyone's time and money, I would imagine.
Well, look, I mean, none of this sounds sort of particularly, pleasant or offences have been caused to anybody, but, I mean, that all falls under the bracket of, treat other people with civility as you'd want to be treated with yourself, right? This is not crimes. This is not what the police should be spending.
And the police are being called out to deal with this nonsense.
As I say, if any of this is called offence to anybody, let's just treat that as being civil to each other, as members all of the same society.
And no one has a right not to be offended.
This is not what the police should be spending their time on. Police, again. If we look at other things the Sun has reported on this week, it's talked about how people are being forced to find their own, bikes and cars, because when they phone up to report them stolen, the police basically say, well, we don't really have time, so people who fitted their own tracking bits and pieces of force. Let's not even talk about the horrendous sort of sexual offences, crime in this country where they're either sort of not reported because people have no faith they'll be prosecuted, or even when they are reported, the prosecution rate is absolutely woeful. So no, I'm pretty angry about this. As I say, I'm not saying any of it sounds very nice, but I'm saying with this, surely these kind of things can be dealt with within the realms if we just sort of live by the philosophy, be kind to each other, treat other people as you'd want to be treated yourself. This to me is not what the police should be spending their time on.
In Dunstable in Bedfordshire, a complainant said they heard a neighbour gossiping on their Ring doorbell, then point at their home and make an insult before walking off. Listen, this sort of stuff happens all the time. It's not particularly nice, but it doesn't mean you should call the police. It's do you know what? It's not just about the fact that these non-crime hate incidents exist. It's the fact that people lift the phone and say, this is a big issue. Clearly, non-crime hate incidents are a way of saying, do you know what? Well, we've logged it as a non-crime hate incident. It's on the record. Is it just about getting rid of these crazy people who ring up and say someone's gossiped about me?
But I think maybe it's that paperwork point. Like, it's easier for the police to log these non-hate crime incidents, which by the way don't really often include a lot of onward action, right?
Yeah.
Than it is to actually go after some of those other actual crimes
and solve crimes
that I've mentioned. So, look, I do think the police have a pretty hard time and thankless task a lot of the times, and sometimes I do defend them, but in this case, no. This is pen pushing, paper workery, and not going after some of the real issues.
Workery, I like
workery, yeah.
Mike, what do you make of this?
I mean, there are things in this, like the Where's Wally tattoo. This gives me the ick, but and also the majority of these incidents described here, most people would say at the moment, if you ask people in my neighbourhood, they're more worried about the phone snatchings that happen in East London. They're more worried about rising levels of knife crime. Again, it's about balancing policing resources against what we consider to be worthy of their time and attention.
Or actual threats to actual people or property. This is not nice. It's not actually harmful. Like, this is the stuff about you should be able to go, okay, I don't like that someone said this, but I'm not going to pick up the phone and use those limited police resources when there are actual threats in terms of, as you say, sort of knife crime or phone snatching against people or property. This isn't nice, but that doesn't mean it should be dealt with by the police.
No, I agree. And I think for me, connected back to Palestine Action as well, the waste of resources around sort of these stunts that are pulled, that whether it's it's like Just Stop Oil or something else like that these are a waste of valuable police resource time. And obviously, frontline policing numbers have been a political issue since Boris Johnson 2019, trying to reverse
way before that as well.
Tony Blair, wasn't it?
Trying to reverse the cuts that happened under the first term of the last Conservative government as well. But ultimately, people need to feel safe and need to feel that the policing resources are being spent at this time. And the police got a spending increase, the only bit of the Home Office that did in the last 7 minutes. I hope that those resources are better spent on particularly tackling violent crime figures and actual threats to people and property, as Amy says.
We're going to talk in just a minute about reparations and Jamaica saying that the King should become involved in the reparations debate. We've got very limited time, about a minute. Can I just have 2 short answers for you on what your thoughts are on reparations? Mike, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, the King should not get involved in this at all. There is a long-lasting and deeply painful legacy to do with slavery in that part of the world. I personally think the issue of reparations is largely a historical one. I don't think it should be dealt with by the current generation. but there are other areas of cultural sensitivity that can be done and shown by the royal family with that, through that unique form of diplomacy that only they can exercise, that don't amount to financial gestures or making blunt apologies.
In a word.
Completely agree.
Okay, well, both of you, thank you very much indeed. That's Amy Fisher, former Conservative Party Director of Communications, and Mike Indian, who's a journalist and commentator. Thanks for coming into the studio and being on the debate desk. Jackie says, morning Peter, funding for the NHS should be based on socio-economic and demographic factors. To base funding on patient satisfaction is just silly and shows that Labour have no serious plan to reform the NHS. And quite a few on kneecap. Joshua from Bridlington says, bet you won't read this out, but quite simply, kneecap are scum. The BBC are definitely scum. Good show as always, Peter, says Joshua. Well, I wish I'd made a bet with you because I did read it out. Lots to discuss on the home of free speech, and whatever your view, if it is within the law, I will read it out and I will air it. So let me know your thoughts. Use the break. Give me a call. Let me know your thoughts on anything Amy or Mike has said, or I have said. We'll talk about reparations in a second too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. It's Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, including reparations. The Caribbean nation Jamaica is to directly petition the monarch, King Charles. Campaigners demanding trillions of pounds in payments. They say it's because of slavery. They should get reparations. This debate has come up again. What do you think? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Where do we get the money? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air about that. We'll also be be talking about the fact that airlines are going to be banned from charging extra for hand luggage. We'll talk about that. Plenty of people happy about that. And Glastonbury, the founder of Glastonbury, Sir Michael Eva, says, go elsewhere if you don't like our politics. Well, I don't like their politics, and I don't like the fact that Kneecap, the Irish rappers who have expressed support for a lot of people I don't like, well, they are people who are, one of them is on a terror charge at the moment. We'll be careful about that, but we're going to talk about the BBC and what happened at 4 o'clock, their performances at 4 o'clock today. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Also, Keir Starmer we're talking about, loads to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and you can send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. We're also going to talk about Islamophobia on this programme. It's an interesting one because the government is having a discussion about what Islamophobia actually is, whether anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia are different things, whether there should be guidance, perhaps even laws around criticising Islam. What do you make of that? 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about Jamaica. It's the first country to exploit the 19th century colonial legislation to directly petition the monarch. So King Charles is, of course, head of state here in the United Kingdom. He's also head of state for the island nation of Jamaica. They have petitioned him, or they're going to petition him, to refer the issue to the Privy Council. The committee is the highest court of appeal for the 15 independent Commonwealth realms which retain the king as their head of state. Jamaica is hoping that after being asked by the king to examine the reparations issue, the committee could then give an opinion as to whether Britain has a legal obligation to offer what they see as a remedy for slavery. Legal experts believe official recognition could actually open the door to payments. Campaigners in Jamaica are seeking up to £18 trillion for reparations. Other Caribbean countries which retain the king as head of state could follow Jamaica and pursue the same strategy. The Jamaican Culture Minister is a woman called Olivia Grange. She announced the plan this week, telling the Jamaican Parliament, we will be submitting a petition to His Majesty King Charles III. Well, what do you make of this? Would you be happy for your money to go to Jamaica in reparations? Let's have a debate about this. Matthew Hulbert is with us. He's a political commentator, former Liberal Democrat councillor. And Alka Sehgal-Cuthberg is the spokeswoman for Don't Divide Us. Matthew, tell us your thoughts on this.
Hi, Peter. Really good to be with you on this Saturday morning. So, I mean, I think we need to trust the Jamaicans on this. They know their country and what it's been through better than we do. And they're asking the person who is presently their head of state, who, as you quite rightly say, is also ours, Charles, to do what under law he can do, which is to ask the Privy Council to consider this matter. And I think he absolutely has a duty to do so.
Do you believe in the principle of reparations? Do you think paying reparations is something we should do?
Yes, because again, I trust the Jamaicans to know their country and what it's been through better than we do. And what they're saying is that the legacy of what happened all those years ago still affects the country today. And
£18 trillion, Matthew? £18 trillion?
Well, I mean, I don't know, I don't pretend to know what the figure should be, but do I think there should be some kind of reparation? Yes, I do. And it's because that the legacy of those years, the Jamaican government says, still affects the country today and causes inequality.
Alka Sehgal-Cuthberg is a spokeswoman for Don't Divide Us. Alka, what do you make of this?
Well, Matthew says he trusts the Jamaican people. It's not exactly the people; it's their political leadership that's calling for this. And I wish he would trust, British people and common sense more, because I think the blame slavery narrative that's being promoted here is about as real as those old Hollywood films, where the cowboys had black and white hats and the white ones were the goodies and the bad ones were the black ones were the baddies. And I think we need we need some reality checks here. We need to remember that Britain, the country that was involved in slavery, which we all agree was terrible, was also the country that was the first in human history to make it illegal to own another human being. this was a huge moral advancement, you know, that has inspired subsequent struggles for freedom and for civil rights here. And the runaway success of British capitalism depended far more on the labour and exploitation of our own working class. And there'll be generations of people alive today who can probably, you know, may have memories of their ancestors who were involved in that, not to mention the efforts of people in Britain, ordinary people, not just the government, to abolish slavery.
So you don't think we owe the Jamaicans anything?
In terms of reparations, no. Absolutely not. If the Jamaican leadership were to approach Britain with a leadership, you know, on an equal footing, not with a begging bowl supplicating, you know, sort of reparations for things done 200 years ago, about which most people either knew little and certainly didn't consent to it, you know, give their willing consent, you know, then that would be a different thing. If there was to be a discussion about what are, first of all, identifying what are the problems facing Jamaica today, which probably have far more to do with poor governance and over-reliance on tourism and remittance rather than developing a rounded economy, and sort of practical, concrete questions like that, then a conversation could be had, you know, as you know, political leaders of different nation states trying to solve a problem, you know, that people can have a share in, not morally blame the people of one country for something they have no responsibility for. If Charles Windsor, as a private individual, wishes to pay money, that's fine. But as a head of the Church of England, you know, and his public title,
and head of state, yeah.
If he does it,
okay.
You know, it's actually fueling public policy that's segregationist in the end.
Segregationist, Matthew?
Well, I certainly, you know, as an avowed and proud Republican, I certainly think that money shouldn't come from the British taxpayer. It darn well should come from Charles's private funds. He can blooming well pay these reparations.
So hold on, Matthew. You think that the King personally should pay reparations, but we as a country shouldn't?
Well, I think this is, well, I mean, there's a debate to be had there, isn't there? I mean,
well, what do you think?
That, you know, well, this is about what the British state did during those times. But do I think that ordinary hardworking folks should have to...
But that's where the money would come from. I mean, the King doesn't have £18 trillion, or even, let's say, £1 trillion. He doesn't have that, and he's got plenty of money. He's got far more money than any of the three of us. But why is he personally responsible for what happened generations ago? Because he heads that dreadful, in my view, institution. It wasn't just the monarchy that wasn't. I mean, the monarchy was to a degree involved in slavery. I'm not saying they weren't. That would be historically inaccurate to say. But there was the whole country. There was the government. There were many people. There were slave owners in the country. I mean, the principle of reparations is that you go against a state. You don't go against an individual. Well, I mean, I'd be saddened if money came from hard-working British taxpayers. But do I think that reparations, whoever pays for them, should be paid? Yes, I absolutely do. Where does the money come from then? Because, you know, it is against the state. And what Jamaica is saying, they're not talking about Charles specifically and his money. They're talking about you and me as the taxpayer paying this. And that's the principle of reparations. And if reparations were paid, they'd be paid almost certainly out of general taxation. Well, the money has to come out of general taxation, and it has to come out of general taxation. What would you then say to people who are struggling, who are paying the most tax that we've paid as a proportion of what the country earned since the Second World War, who were in a cost of living crisis, and because of crimes that you, Alka, and I had absolutely nothing to do with, because we weren't even born, we weren't even thought of generations ago, you're advocating that money comes from the public purse and goes to Jamaica, Matthew? I just don't understand that argument. So are you saying, Peter, and is your guest saying, that crimes can be committed, as long as it's far enough back, we don't have to kind of be responsible for them or you know, pay reparations about them? As long as it's long enough to go. Is that what you're saying? I think that's what Alka's saying. Are you saying that? Yes. Don't put money words in your mind.
I am saying that because you cannot change the past, right? The past happened. Also, much more importantly, the kind of, you know, white guilt narrative that, you know, your other guest is taking on here is utterly patronising. It denies responsibility to an agency. We should feel guilt. Hold on.
Alka, I promise I'll come back to you in a second.
You feel the guilt all you want, mate, but many of us don't, and we've got no reason to.
Matthew, why should we feel guilt about what happened historically?
Because we are British citizens, and the British state ruled the roost over a great deal of the world and behaved in a way that was absolutely intolerable.
I don't think anybody disagrees
Jamaican...
with that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that in regard to slavery, which, as Alka points out, the UK abolished. But as well as you correctly say, everything you say is factually correct there, Matthew. I just don't really understand why it's my fault.
But it's the state's fault. I mean, you're personalising this in a way that I think isn't really helpful.
Well, it would feel pretty personal. It would feel pretty personal if the money came out of my taxation to pay for something that happened hundreds of years ago.
But what needs to be established, and this is what the Jamaican government is claiming, and your other guest tried to suggest that somehow the Jamaican government doesn't represent the Jamaican people. Well, they're the elected government of Jamaica, so in that sense, they do. They are saying that the inequalities still there in Jamaica, the inequalities of today, have been affected historically by the legacy of slavery, and surely, therefore, they are deserving of reparations.
Sorry, we do not have to believe everything that anybody says, no matter who they are. We have our own reason and our own capacity to think for ourselves and simply ask, is it true? And I put it to you that the leadership, the political elites of certain countries within CARICOM have probably, are responding to their own internal pressures. They're facing problems of their own within their country of poor governance, corruption, uneven economic development within their country, or, uneven and weak infrastructure.
So there's no legacy. Are you claiming there's no legacy? Is that what you're claiming?
One at a time.
There's been a lot that's happened between 200 years ago and now, right? It's not like...
So there's no legacy?
Well, I would know. I don't think there is. I think the causes of current day problems lie much closer to home chronologically and geographically, and we need to look at that. To just put a blanket narrative of it's all down to slavery actually shows a real lack of curiosity about what today's problems are. Are they the same as 200 years ago? I think not. Is the solution to just pay reparations, like a kind of pseudo paying of indulgences to make yourself feel better? I mean, certain people might think that, but it's not a narrative that is either historically warranted or ethically
Okay, Matthew, what do you make of that?
I think that the British state has a moral responsibility for what it did and for what it does. So whether the British state of today or the British state of all those years ago, for the way that we ruled the roost for so long.
Why?
Well, I mean, I think I've said why, because
you say you feel guilt. Okay, hold on a second. You say you feel guilt, and we should feel guilt. That means you personally feel guilt for what the state has done. I don't really understand your personal feelings on this, Matthew.
Well, I don't know how I can be more open about what my feelings are, Peter. I think that we, as the state, that we as people who live in Britain, British citizens, British taxpayers, should feel some responsibility for what the British state did overseas all those years ago. We behaved intolerably in places like Jamaica, and good on them for wanting some justice on this.
So the sins of the father should be visited on the children?
Well, then I'd ask you and your guest, Peter, how many years have to elapse for things not to be our responsibility? What is the cut-off point? Come on, what is it?
Alka?
Why don't you try just allowing that, you claim to be speaking, standing up for Jamaica. You're actually patronising Jamaican people. Why don't you
I'm agreeing with their government.
Why don't you allow the fact that they have an agency and responsibility? They have had independence for several decades now. There may well be problems that we need looking at within that own governance. You seem
so nothing to do with me, That's your attitude, is it?
No, I think there may be whatever problems they are will be to do with today's arrangements and political.
Okay, let me pose another question.
What happened in the past?
Let me pose another question, Matthew. Where should the reparations go? Should it go to the people? Should it go to the government? Who should it go to?
Well, I expect that it would go to the government first off, and then I'd expect them to give it to the most neediest parts of their country. And again,
what if they don't?
Well, I think there'd be serious trouble if they didn't, and there'd need to be some kind of policy or procedure around that. If this money was
for those
going
people receiving it, what if someone moves to Jamaica from, let's say, Spain, has a child with someone who's half Spanish and half Jamaican? Should the child get half the money that other people do?
Well, I don't know about that, Peter, but I think that would be up for the British state, not for the British state. I think that would be up for the Jamaican government, to decide. But I would expect it to go to people who've been in Jamaica. I would expect it to go, to be honest with you, to perhaps the oldest Jamaicans who've lived with this for this situation for longest. But I would trust the Jamaican government to know where this money should go.
Alka?
It's a total fantasy. It's a pity. It's a pity you don't trust, your own people. Right? You're just totally sacralising Jamaican people at the expense of really insulting British people. To be honest,
why do you think?
How am I doing that?
Why do you think?
How am I insulting? How am I insulting British people?
Because you're
okay. Well, let's hear her answer, Matthew.
Let me finish. I'll answer that question because you're ignoring the fact that. What happened historically, slavery and the industrialisation of Britain, the industrialisation of Britain was dependent on the labour and exploitation of generations of indigenous population who were mainly white British people, right? That's just a fact. It was not dependent on slavery.
So should those mill workers get reparations, Matthew?
Anyone who's been...
Their descendants?
Anyone who has been mistreated as a result of a system that shouldn't have been acting as it was should be able to get some recompense for that, yes.
Okay. Final word from Alka on this, please.
It's a very naive and dangerous fantasy. The world doesn't work like that. You will be if this goes ahead, it will be simply entrenching a narrative that it will be divisive amongst Britain between those of us who are black.
Our actions were divisive.
And therefore, we're talking about now, Peter, right? If you want to live 200 years ago, that's your prerogative. I'm talking about...
History matters. How do we learn if we don't... How do we learn?
Have we not learned from history? Have we not learned from history, Matthew? We don't have slavery anymore in this country. Modern slavery exists. It's a terrible thing. But the state does... Let me just finish. Let me just finish, Matthew.
Which country abolished slavery?
Hold on. Let me just finish here. Modern slavery exists. It's a terrible thing, and we have to eradicate it. Absolutely exist. Let me finish. Absolutely get that. The type of slavery that existed 200, 300 years ago doesn't exist anymore. We have abolished it. We have learned from history, have we not, Matthew?
And so again, what the pair of you seem to be saying is that because we quite rightly abolished slavery, and it was absolutely our moral duty to do so. So I don't think we should get some great praise for that. It would have been appalling if we hadn't have done that. That because we've done that, that's the end of the whole matter.
So you don't think William Wilberforce is a hero then?
I do think. Well, have I said that, Peter?
You said people should get praise for abolishing slavery. You said people should get praise for abolishing slavery. It's a logical extension of what you just said.
It isn't. I absolutely believe that William Wilberforce should go down as a great historical figure, and what he did was right. But I also don't necessarily think that the state should get great praise for ending what should never have happened in the first place.
Okay, thank you both very much. That is Matthew Hulbert there, political commentator, Liberal Democrat activist, and Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert, who is a spokeswoman.
Cheers, always a pleasure. Take care.
Oh, don't divide us. We got a little bit of extra Matthew there at the end. Lots of reaction to this. Let's hear first from Judy, who has sent me a voice note.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. Tell all those that want reparations for slavery that as soon as we get ours from the Romans and the Vikings, we'll give them theirs. See's the answer. I bet Starmer pays up to them. He will do. He's never seen a woke programme that he doesn't follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Let's hear from Mark.
Hiya, Peter. Mark from Manchester. With this repatriation, can we claim back off Jamaica and all the rest of them West Indian countries all the dole and benefits we've given to these people since we've let them in the country?
Well, it's a fair point there, Mark. I think, the Caribbean nation of Jamaica, obviously, at the heart of all this. Let's take a call from Graham in Liverpool on this 0344 499 1000. Graham, what do you make of it?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking the call. I just don't get where this Liberal's coming from. Obviously, he doesn't know his history. Obviously, he doesn't know the history of the working class in this country. I am no Labourite, I'm no socialist, but when you read back at the old mining communities, of which my family is one of them, from mid-Wales, from the 1700s, what they were doing, they were working down the mines naked. They were actually getting the coal out and then getting paid in tokens, which they then had to go to the mine shop and transfer the token into food, clothing.
I mean, that's basically slavery.
That's basically slavery. Now, the women, they were on the top of the mine, and they were pushing 1 ton coal. I'm getting angry now. 1 ton coal that is out, and they were half naked because of the heat. They got taken out to the children who were aged 10, and those children had to then go through that coal and take out the rock from that 1 ton berry, because if there was one piece of stone in that 1 ton berry, they wouldn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that is absolute slavery. Okay.
So
slavery.
From what you've described there, do you think that reparations should be paid for that?
No.
Okay.
But that's the same situation. They were tied to the mine. They couldn't get out the mine because that was the only food they could get. And it's absolutely disgraceful. This Liberal believes that the working class of this country owes anybody anything, because we don't. Now let's go further up the scale. Let's have a look at the lords and the ladies who owned the shall I say, the slaves of this country.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Irish were slaves over in America as well. They were the first slaves over there, and people forget that. People who were tied to these lords and ladies who did things wrong, and then they were sent over to work in their lands over in America. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody. So I'm sorry, this Liberal doesn't know his history, doesn't care about the people of this country, especially the working class, and neither does Labour. I am angry. I'm angry for the working class, and I'm angry at this individual who comes on wholeheartedly with his soul saying that we, the people of this country, owe people money, and we don't.
Okay.
And does he expect immigrants who come into this country who are working hard, pay the taxes, black, brown, Chinese, whatever, does he expect them to pay as well?
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. If you're Jamaican, for example, imagine you're Jamaican, you come to the UK, should your tax be used to give money back to Jamaica? I mean, it's a complicated argument. Graham, you make a very, very strong and very good argument there, and thank you for it. Graham, give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What do you think about this? Give me a call. Let me know your thoughts. There's quite a number of people getting in touch. I'll read more of those in a minute. We're also going to talk about Islamophobia and the government coming up with a new definition of what Islamophobia actually is. I am pretty worried about what that means for free speech. We should be able to criticise Islam just as we should be able to criticise Christianity, Judaism, Sikhism or any other religion without fear of legal redress. We'll talk about that with Professor Anthony Cleese in just a minute here on Talk.
this new idea of one in, one out, how ridiculous, what a farce. It's not going to change any numbers.
No.
And everyone's going to claim that they've got some family connection, which personally I would 100% do away with if I was in charge of this area of policy. So it's going to be just a merry-go-round. As always, the French are laughing, at us. The world is laughing at us. We do not have big borders. Why can we not police our borders, Mike?
They promised stability.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ian's in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Ian, what's your perspective on the reparations debate?
Well, it's very, very fun. I've just come out of hospital, and one of the nurses I've been to, she's from Jamaica, and she said the biggest problem in Jamaica, and they're not worried about the reparations, is that China is spending billions there and getting all the and causing things. So basically, with Mr. Lamy, our great foreign secretary, and I know what you think of him, he's already given the money to China with the Chagos Islands. Now he's doing the same thing in Jamaica. So it seems to be that China are causing the issues, and they're doing it everywhere where Britain had an empire.
Well, you're right. David Lammy is on the record. He is in favour of reparations. He's not. It doesn't look as if he's doing it as foreign secretary so far, Ian. But I'm getting from what you're saying that you wouldn't be happy for reparations to be paid.
No, unfortunately, I'm just going to petrol stations. I go, Peter. Sorry.
Okay, well, Ian, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate them. That's Ian in London. Sheila says, my family is from Cork in Ireland. Can I have reparations for all my relatives forced out of their country by the British in the land grab and in the potato famine? That is Sheila in Norfolk. And Christina in Spain says, I always enjoy your show, Peter. It's time that the past just stayed there. We have horrendous modern day slavery happening now. That is where the focus should be, or is that too difficult for the bedwetters? Well, we'll talk more about this as the show goes on. Plenty of people want to get their voice heard on it. If you're one of them, give me a shout, 0344 499 1000 for a call or a voice note. Let's talk now about another thing the government is doing. This is discussing Islamophobia. What is Islamophobia and what does it actually mean, and what are the implications of how we look at it? Now, we know that attacks on Muslims in England and Wales, this is something that have increased recently. There have been attacks on all sorts of different ethnic minorities, including the levels of anti-Semitism in this country that are absolutely off the scale. We know as well that there's a difference between anti-Muslim hatred and the idea of Islamophobia, and there are a lot of worries around this in terms of saying criticising Islam could actually be made illegal, or at least there could be some sanction in order if that actually happens. Well, I want to talk to Professor Anthony Glees now about this. Professor Glees, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Apologies, we just kept you waiting slightly. I do apologise for that. I just wonder what you think Islamophobia should actually be defined as.
Well, a phobia is defined as an irrational fear. So the very concept of Islamophobia is very, very dubious, because over the years, certainly in the UK since 1999, we have suffered badly from terror attacks carried out wrongly, but carried out in the name of Islam. We call these Islamist. We don't call them Islamic, because we distinguish between the religion of Islam and Islamist terrorism. Now, it's not irrational to be afraid of them. We've got a huge national security infrastructure which is focused on dealing with threats from Islamist terrorists, both at home and those that might be coming in from abroad, not least on channel boats. It's not a phobia. It's a reality.
And I'm really worried that Labour has set up a working group on this. They've been talking for about 6 months. I'm really worried, Anthony, that there will be some legal sanction for criticising things to do with Islam. And what is worrying me is, for example, if you point out something factual, like the vast majority of people involved in the rape gangs that now, thankfully, there's a national inquiry into are Pakistani Muslims, that factual point could be construed as quote-unquote Islamophobia. That's what I worry about.
Yeah, well, I think, Peter, I think you're right to be worried about it. And of course, we don't really know where the government is. Many people agreed with what our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, said when he talked about the dangers that we could become an island of strangers if we continued with the immigration policy introduced after Brexit by Boris Johnson. Forgive me for saying it's a policy that Nigel Farage at the time touted, a points-based immigration system like they have in Australia. Now, Sir Keir Starmer said we must not become an island of strangers, and I think he was absolutely right.
He doesn't think he was absolutely right. He says he regrets the comments and regrets using that phrase.
Well, that, Peter, is my point. He's now saying he regrets having made those comments. So if he regrets having made those comments, what does he think about mass immigration? And we know that many of the people making the dangerous cross-channel trip to the United Kingdom come from an Islamic background, and some of them, we know, are Islamists. So this isn't a phobia, it's entirely rational, and you would expect a government to make a rational decision.
Will they? Do you trust them to make a rational decision on this?
You know, you tell me. At the moment, they seem all over the place. Yes, Sir Keir has been travelling the world, and I think he'd been doing good in a national security sense. I really do believe that in his trade deals. But he probably doesn't know what day it is, and he probably doesn't know what time of day it is. We do have many Labour MPs who believe that they rely for their votes on Muslim voters and want to conflate anti-Muslim feeling, which is of course disgraceful, and like anti-Semitism or anti-Catholicism or any anti. We don't want that. We Brits are a fair-minded people. We, on the whole, think people's religion should be a private business. But Islamophobia puts it into the political realm, and it does mean that if you were to criticise Islamist tactics, you would quickly find people saying, no, it's anti-Muslim. And you talk about the grooming gangs. What we've not heard from many people from the Muslim British community is that they condemn those gangs wholeheartedly. And we also know much more about them now because people haven't been afraid to speak out, that a lot of these gangs, people are related by cousin marriage, and there are links between the people and the cops.
There's an interesting point in all of that as well, in that there have been, there's a counsellor from a Pakistani Muslim background who did condemn those gangs, said that he totally supported the national inquiry. But you're right, Anthony, and that is all too rare. And I wonder whether it's people, it's going to be a mixture, I would imagine, of people not wanting to do it for lots of reasons, some of them completely disgraceful, and fear as well.
Well, I just don't think the people of this country will stand for any kind of muzzling of what they might feel about this kind of thing going on. So Sir Keir, he needs to have a bit of a holiday. He needs to rethink. He needs to reread his Island of Strangers speech. Most Brits think it was an excellent speech.
Well, actually, it's fascinating you should mention that, Anthony, because most people contacting me this morning said that's one of the few things he said that they actually agreed with. Professor Anthony Gleeson, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. I appreciate that. We're going to talk in just a second about your views on what Anthony Gleeson has said. We're also going to talk about a new complaints guidance. This is a centralised unit that the Department for Education is setting up to complain about schools. Did you know that 38% of parents have put a formal complaint in about their school? Who should deal with it? The school, a centralised government bureaucrats probably working from home? Are they people who should actually deal with this? Do they know what's happening with their child's education? It's a really interesting topic, and we're going to talk about it with Laura McInerney, who is one of the best education commentators in this country, if not the best. She's coming up next. You're going to want to hear this. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody for getting in touch. Dan and Kent says, put aside the absolute stupidity of Matthew Hilbert's argument. If Britain paid all these reparations, it would simply bankrupt Britain, which would see a return of slavery. And Graham's been in touch. He says, my family didn't arrive in the UK until the late 1800s, so why should I pay towards reparations when all that happened over 100 years before my family were even here and have no connection with anybody involved in slavery? Stuart says, the late great Christopher Hitchens wrote that Islamophobia was a word created by fascists and used by cowards to manipulate morons. I can't see any reason to argue with that, can you? Christopher Hitchens said a lot of very, very wise things. I met him once, actually. Dave in Birmingham said, will the Jews and the Gypsies get reparations from the Germans? Can our soldiers do the same to the Japanese? Imagine Donald Trump paying trillions to the families of Dr. Martin Luther King or the families of Geronimo, he says. And one more from Ian in Walsall says, morning, Peter. Why doesn't the lefty-lovey idiot Matthew O'Dare start a Facebook page for all those who want to pay into this idiotic tripe? See how much he raises. Well, it's not nice to call people idiots, and I don't think Matthew's an idiot. He's just someone that a lot of us, including Ian and including me, disagree with. Arthur in Seaford says, maybe the African nations that sold the slaves in the first place should pay reparations. What do you think? Says Arthur. Well, what do you think? 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about the government drawing up new guidance for schools and parents over complaints. This is to reduce the burden on leaders. I don't know if you've made a complaint about your child or maybe your grandchild's school. 38% of parents have, apparently, which seems really high, but is apparently true. Ministers have said the advice will be published shortly amid concerns over the increasing number of complaints and the toll on teachers and head teachers. The Department for Education itself in London is thinking of setting up a centralised unit to deal with these complaints. I don't know about you, but if you've dealt with central government bureaucracy, as many of us do with, I don't know, HMRC, for example, it's not perhaps a model of efficiency, but would it ease the pressure on teachers, or are they just whinging? Let's find out from Laura McInerney, who is co-founder of Teacher Tap, former teacher herself. Laura, what do you make of this? Good morning.
Good morning. I mean, something does need to be done. The number of complaints that schools are dealing with has gone up a lot. So just to give you some context, before the pandemic and afterwards, things like the schools inspectorate, they've had their complaints go up by a third. In DFE, within 2 years during the pandemic, the numbers doubled and then they've stayed very high. And so just the amount of work that goes into this is not good. And also, it does suggest that something might be going on from the school side, right? Like, is it that parents have suddenly become very entitled and they want to do a lot more? Or actually, is it that they do need more help and that the schools are not delivering? Like, it's worth the government having a look to try and figure out what's going on with this.
Why are the complaints going up so much, do you think? And what are they about?
So they can be about a whole raft of different things. It might be how the teacher is dealing with the class. Obviously, we've had a huge increase in the number of children with special educational needs. And that means people often want diagnosis. They need extra support for their child. And if they don't feel that's forthcoming, it is one of the areas that has seen a huge, huge increase in complaints. But it can also be a whole range of different things, not getting into a certain school through to not having subjects available for GCSEs. So a raft of different things. In terms of why it's happening, as I say, there is a view that parents expect more. Certainly we know now that parents, you know, people say they sort of get younger. Obviously they're the same, their children are about the same age, but at the moment, if you're taking your child into school, you're probably on average about 35. That means you did your GCSEs in 2005, and that was a time when schools had lots and lots of money. We really increased the number of people who passed their GCSEs, went to universities. So parents now often had a very good experience of school. They had an experience of social mobility, and if they're not seeing that for their own children, then they want to know why. So there's an idea around entitlement. I think there's an issue around whether or not the schools are able to deliver like they used to. Funding has dramatically fallen per pupil and in terms of how much is available. So schools just don't have the staff on the ground to deal with these issues. And then the third problem is around the fact that you don't know who to complain to. So over the last 15 years, it's been very fragmented. And what school leaders say is they're dealing with more of what they call spray and pray. So whereas in the past a parent would have come and complained to them, dealt with it all the way up through the head teacher, the governing body, and then the local council, now they send it to the teacher misconduct agency that exists. They send it to the National Inspectorate. They send it to the Department for Education. They're sort of sending these complaints everywhere, and that's what's causing the workload.
So could a centralised unit actually help in terms of streamlining the process? But at the same time, I think a lot of people will be worried about just dealing with bureaucracy, but maybe it's less bureaucracy to deal with.
Right, and in the ideal situation, what you would have is a simple way of speaking with the school, a simple way of dealing with the problem, and everybody gets on with it. And I think that's what the schools want, and that's what the parents want. But if they do send out these complaints to 3 or 4 agencies, then as a leader, you can be dealing with the parent, but also simultaneously having 3 or 4 different government agencies turning up at your door. So the Confederation for Schools Trust have asked for what they call like a single entry point, so that a parent, if they're not dealing with the school anymore or they're not happy, have one place that they go to. It can then be meted out to the right agency, or it can be dealt with via one route. And those leaders and the parents aren't now dealing with multiple different agencies. And that does, to me, sound like it would be better.
Laura, I just wonder if you think this proposal by Bridget Phillipson is something that is actually practical. Can you see it actually happening, or are they just floating a test balloon to see how people react to it? No doubt you'll be doing some polling on Teacher Tap, I would imagine.
Yes, and I mean, look, in terms of the polling that we've been doing, we have seen that leaders are dealing with increased numbers of complaints and increased numbers of abuse. So I think they're in the right space to be tackling things. This is a genuine concern from leaders on the ground. They talk about it an awful lot when I'm out and about speaking with them. Will it work? It always comes down to the implementation. At least they are doing this 7-day research project now, trying to get parents who have complained to look at what the process should be. But as ever, they are hamstrung by the fact they're trying to improve things with less money. At the same time, if you're not duplicating work across several different agencies, then it might be that this is one of those rare occasions that they save cash, they make things easier, and they make everybody happier. And I'd love to be back in 6 months' time and say that's what's happened. But, you know, we have sat here before and things didn't quite go to plan.
Yes, I'm not sure the strapline at the bottom of our screen is going to be, isn't the government marvellous? Laura, thank you so much for your excellent analysis there. Laura McInerney, who is the co-founder of Teacher Tap. She's a former teacher herself. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Sarah's been in touch with a message and says, I complained to Ofsted twice about my daughter's school, who knew that 2 children with terrible mental health problems were suicidal. They did not consider it a safeguarding risk, so did not inform the parents of either children. Both tried to kill themselves within 2 days. Ofsted didn't even reply, says Sarah. On reparations as well, an awful lot of people getting in touch. George says, simple solution to reparations. If you want to give your money away, you're free to do so. Go on. How much and how often are you going to donate, Matthew? Show us the receipts, says George. Another person says, I thought Labour were bad, the Liberal Democrats are worse. Have other countries actually done anything? Tim says, pay reparations, but only for anyone who is claiming to relocate permanently back to Africa. If the issue they were forcibly removed from Africa, then they can go back there. Reparations should not be paid to anyone, as it's not our problem. But if they're paid to Jamaica, I will also expect massive compensation for the damage done to my ancestors by the Empire during the Boer War. Similar thoughts, I think, from Mark in Norfolk. He says, William the Conqueror killed an estimated 50,000 to 100,000 English, Welsh and Scottish people who died of starvation, massacres and disease during the invasion. Why shouldn't the French pay us reparations? What's the difference? It's a ridiculous argument, says Mark in Norfolk. Ask that plonker if his grandfather killed someone and got away with it, should he now be sentenced to life in prison? I assume you're referring to Matthew Hulbert, who I don't think is a plonker. I just think he's someone who we totally disagree with. I think a lot of us anyway. Betty says, 0.1% of the UK, i.e. royals and gentry, owned all the Empire's assets. The same 1% own everything in the UK today. Why is the taxpayer paying? The royals and lords should pay first. And David Walthamstow says, no way should we pay reparations unless they repay for time, sailors and ships. We spent trawling the seas getting rid of slave ships, and we are the country that got rid the world of slavery, but many other countries keep slavery going today. Glastonbury is also something that we're talking about. We're going to talk about that with Nicole Lampert a little bit later on. She's a journalist who covers so many issues, both showbiz and anti-Semitism and many, many other matters as well. James has been in touch about this and has sent me a voice note. This is what James has to say.
I had the chance to work at Glastonbury so many times. I thought I'd make sure I never go to work there, let alone go there. And this coverage by the BBC this year, it is absolutely disgraceful. I didn't know you could make political left-wing soppy woke music, but I don't know no one there either. Half the bands and I know the music. What's going on? You got Neil Young. He won't let you film him. Fair enough. He's an old school rebel. Good. And a bit of Rod Stewart and a bit of Alanis Morissette. Who else is there?
James, it's a fair point on Neil Young, actually, and he is saying that the BBC can't film him. Rod Stewart as well, interesting in that he has said in an interview that he thinks that we should give Nigel Farage a chance. Not often you hear musicians saying that, but a really interesting thought from him. I wonder what you make of it. Let's hear another thought on Glastonbury. This is from Dave, who I think his daughter's there.
Hi, Peter. Dave in Camberley here. My daughter's at Glastonbury today, and after hearing about the bar prices, I've just transferred her £250. Hopefully that will help anaesthetise against the horror of seeing Kneecap and those foolish wannabe terrorists. Thanks, great show.
Wow. Thank you, Dave. I'm sure Kneecap would deny that they want to be terrorists in any accent, but thank you for that, Dave, nonetheless. What a generous dad yours. Can you send me £250? I'm only joking. Don't send me money. Do not send me money. But Dave, good for you for looking after your daughter. But yeah, there are huge prices. Of course, it's all about peace and love and, keeping everyone togetherness, obviously, with the huge barriers to keep out people who haven't paid the hundreds and hundreds of pounds to go to Glastonbury and pay the huge uninflated prices for all the food that's there. We'll take more of your thoughts on reparations, on Glastonbury, on MPs, on the left wing, on all sorts of things, Palestine Action as well. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. We'll get some more of your thoughts after the break.
to send all the terrorists and scumbags off to. We need to resurrect something like that, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's an Ascension Island or in the middle of nowhere. That's what we need, because frankly, whether it's the asylum seekers, the bogus asylum seekers who are almost exclusively fighting age men coming over here, or whether it's any of the other wrong-uns that we've got in this country, I don't know about you, I am so tired of having to live around these people. I want them deported, I want them arrested, and I want us to go back to having a nice, calm, civilised society again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Stephen in London, and says on kneecap, put aside whether the BBC should show them or not. Personally, I don't think they should, but the Glastonbury organisation, the organisers, have purposefully gone out of the way to put this group on stage, knowing how controversial they are, what they've said, and all that's behind it. A very questionable billing, says Stephen. Betty says, how about the King and Royals pay tax and capital gains tax on the full estate received from the Queen before they start giving any more of my money away? Steve from the West Country says, will Keith... Lots of people call him Keith. Why do you call him Keith? I just find it curious. Keith petitioned Georgia Maloney for reparations after What Did the Romans Do for Us? What a joke, says Steve in the West Country. Brian says, good morning. If they want us to pay reparations, how about they go after the African countries that sold their own people? Let them deal with that one first, then come and talk to us. Vicky says, I want my reparations from the Italians and the Romans. I would have maintained my pagan heritage were it not for them wiping us out. Graham says, morning Peter, regarding Jamaica, I consider Jamaica should pay compensation to the UK for stopping it. All the best, says Graham. I think there's another one on kneecap. Yes, this person says, good morning Peter, while that group are performing, myself, I'm a former RUC officer, and my son, who's an army veteran, will be celebrating our military family by attending our Armed Forces Day in Huntingdon. I would sooner stick pins in my eyes than watch kneecap, says Nikki in Huntingdon. Well, thank you for that, Nikki. Let's hear a few more voice notes. This one from Peter.
Good morning, this is Peter from Norfolk. Peter has just said on his programme in response to a criticism from one caller that these MPs that you have on are only there to tell us what they've been told to say. Well, if that's the case, then what they are saying is just government propaganda and we should not have to listen to it because it's patently rubbish. Thank you.
Peter, I really do think that we should be interviewing our elected representatives. I interviewed the Prime Minister about 10 days ago. A lot of people said I wasn't hard enough on him. A lot of people said maybe, we should have had longer. I would have loved longer. I'd love to sit down for an hour with the Prime Minister. I'd love to sit down for much longer and have much longer interviews with all sorts of MPs. And I really do think that our leaders do deserve the scrutiny, and I'm very grateful for them for coming on this programme. A lot of them, I suppose I probably could have expressed myself slightly better. I think they're told what to say in the sense that they have lines to take. There is policy, and if you're a member of a political party, most parties anyway, the idea is that you've one idea as a party and they come up with a different idea on, for example, welfare or the NHS or whatever. So essentially, yeah, they're told what to say, but they also consent to being told what to say, I suppose. Some of them don't. People like Richard Bergen, for example, who interviewed yesterday, he will not be voting for the welfare legislation on Tuesday. It's fine to talk to him as well, I think, although I strongly disagree with him on Palestine action. And I think Mark, who is one of our people on voice notes, who sent a voice note in, has some thoughts.
Morning, Mark in Lincolnshire. Great show, mate. Regarding Starmer, I'm just waiting, his Island of Strangers. I'm just waiting for him to go full on. Let's have a Rivers of Blood speech from Starmer. That'd be fantastic. As for Palestine action, bang them up, 30 years, whatever, don't really care. They're, as far as I'm concerned, terrorists. The minute you start attacking military bases, you're a terrorist. Whatever your motivation is irrelevant. You do that, you're a terrorist. Cheers, Peter.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for that. I should say as well that on Friday, that's going to be the 4th of July, it's going to mark 1 day since Labour's landslide victory. To commemorate the occasion, Talk has put together a 1-hour special. I have been involved with it, been giving my tuppence worth, looking back on Keir Starmer's first 12 months. That's 1 year of chaos, which is going to air on Friday, the 4th of July at 9 o'clock. So that is coming up. All your favourites. Kev's in there, Julia's in there, Alex, Ian as well. I think there's so many of us who have given our thoughts. Kev, of course, on Starmer and what he has been up to. Thanks to Matt in Newcastle. He says, funny how the education specialist did not mention the main complaint from parents being the woke indoctrination they're being taught. Matt, I think that's the complaint from many parents, certainly. I don't think it's the number one issue that's going to be the level of complaints, but certainly those complaints have gone up to a huge degree. Let us know your thoughts on all of that, and indeed what Nicole Lambert is going to talk to us about in a second. Kneecap, Glastonbury and Palestine action. Stay with us here on Talk 0344 499 1000.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well,
It is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. I want to hear your views on all of it. Palestine Action says it has plans to strike more places. This is after arrests, after RAF Bryce Norton, the break-in there, the sabotage of the planes there. Really interestingly, Richard Bergen, the left-wing Labour MP, failed to condemn it yesterday, given plenty of opportunities to do so. He did not. The founder of Glastonbury says, go elsewhere if you don't like our politics. Well, at 4 o'clock, the rappers from Northern Ireland, Kneecap, are going to be playing there. Should they? Should the BBC show it? And also, we'll be talking this hour about hand luggage. What does this mean for passengers? Airlines will not be allowed to charge passengers any additional fees for carrying hand luggage on board. It's a big, big decision. It's going to have an impact on all of it. Well, a lot of us anyway. Lots of people heading off on holidays before too long in the next few weeks. And we'll also talk about Army veterans and PTSD and the fact that there are people who have been waiting literally over a decade to get counselling for post-traumatic stress disorder, having served our country bravely in Iraq and Afghanistan. Lots of people getting in touch. You can too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on that main number, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss, as I say, between now and 1. Stay with me for the next hour here on Talk. Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. I just want to read out a couple of messages, including Bobby. This is quite a debate we had actually an hour ago, and the messages are still coming in on reparations. This is the idea from Jamaica, from their government, that we should give them 18 trillion, that's right, trillion pounds, 1,000 billion, 18 trillion pounds of reparations for the slave trade. Peter said there was no time scale. It didn't matter to him that we ended slavery over 250 years ago. This is talking about Matthew, who's for these reparations. Matthew Hulbert, we spoke about earlier. So my answer to him is, where are our reparations from slavery? Will he be as vocal with the Italians or the Egyptians for Jewish slavery, or is he morally selective? Well, we heard a lot of what Matthew had to say. Ian texted in at one stage to call him an idiot. I said Matthew's not an idiot. Matthew's someone we like to hear from. He is someone who comes on this programme. We appreciate that. And I think he's misguided on this. I disagree with him, but I don't think he's an idiot. Ian says, sorry, Peter, for referencing Matthew as an idiot. You're very good to apologise, Ian. You don't need to, but very kind of you to do so. He's messaged in again and says, sorry, Peter, for referencing Matthew as an idiot. He's an intelligent man. I was just trying to put across his idiotic point, which is a perfectly reasonable message, I think. Susan says, reparations, if paid, should be paid by those ultra-rich families who benefited from that period, not from the taxes paid by people whose grandparents were exploited and lived in poverty in this country. Well, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts. You know how to do so, but the number 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about an interview I did yesterday, and there's still quite a lot around about this. I want to talk to Nicole Lambert, who's a journalist who is with me now. Good afternoon, Nicole. Great to have you on the programme.
Hi, Peter. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon.
There's loads to talk about. We're going to talk about kneecap in a minute or two. We're going to talk about Glastonbury in general. We're going to talk about a two-tier policing row over a Palestinian territories protester dressed as a Holocaust victim. There's loads to talk about. I know, because I sent it to you last night, that we were talking as well, and you have some opinions on what Richard Bergen said. I just want to remind our viewers and listeners, before I get your opinions, Nicole, on what Richard Bergen said to me yesterday. He's a Labour MP, and I asked him very, very simply about what Palestine Action had done at RAF Bryce Norton, breaking in, sabotaging equipment, planes there. I asked him to condemn them. This is what he said. Palestine Action is a non-violent group. I mean, they broke into RAF Bryce Norton and caused a lot of apparent criminal damage. You don't seem to be condemning them.
Well, this goes to the very point I'm trying to make, though. You just referred to them carrying out criminal damage. And I think it was notable that in the Home Secretary's statement about her intention to prescribe this organisation, Palestine Action, a word that kept appearing again and again was criminal act, criminal act. Well, criminal acts can be prosecuted under the criminal law. So even those opposed to such tactics should see, in my opinion, that prescribing Palestine Action, treating them as terrorists, is a dangerous step. And I'll tell you why. Because what you could end up with is constituents of mine and others who aren't members of Palestine Action or any group could end up facing potential legal action.
Although Palestine Action itself, Richard, has said that in a meeting accessed by the Telegraph newspaper, that resistance lives on the streets in cities and towns and in prison, and says that they're spreading intifada in prison. You haven't condemned Palestine Action, and I'm going to give you another opportunity to condemn the criminal acts that they did. Can you just condemn them?
Well, criminal acts can be dealt with by the criminal courts. And what
do you condemn them?
What worries me?
Do you condemn what happened at RAF Bryce Norton?
Well, there's a tradition, isn't there, in this country, a country that prides itself on civil liberties, of these issues being dealt with through the criminal courts, and sometimes juries acquit people. They acquitted the Greenham Common women in relation to...
Okay, let me ask you in a different way. Do you think it was wrong for Palestine Action to break into RAF Bryce Norton and use, as they put on their own social media channels, they filmed it, they did it, they've been straight out there saying this happened. In fact, we may not even have known about it had they not told us. Were they right or wrong to do that?
Well, that can be put before the criminal court.
What do you think?
The question you're asking me...
The question I'm asking is it right or wrong?
Well, they take direct action, which I don't take, in relation to trying to stop the genocide.
Can you just say yes or no? Can you just say the words right or wrong? What do you think?
Well, I'm sure you're enjoying this part of the show. But
not really. I just want an answer. I would have enjoyed it a heck of a lot more had he just told me what he thought, really. And I think him not condemning it and not saying it's wrong perhaps speaks volumes. Nicole, what do you think?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And I think what we're seeing really is a kind of radicalisation now. We're seeing the left and the far left, and they're unable to condemn even the most basic acts of terrorism, which is terrorising our own military equipment. And I think what we're seeing really, it feels to me like, and I hope this doesn't sound too conspiracist, but there is foreign action at work, or, you know, whether it's the enemy within or whatever, but there are people within our own society that are working against our country, that are happy to see our military equipment being attacked. And this is at the same time as Keir Starmer and the rest of Europe recognises that we need to step up on our military and all of that, because the world is becoming a more dangerous place. And at the same time, someone like him, they want to let go people that are attacking our RAF planes. And it makes me feel that we are a society in danger, and that he represents part of that kind of left-wing ideology that either closes its eyes or even enjoys weakening the British state, and I find that deeply concerning.
One thing where I think it's really interesting, actually, the Attorney General of this country, Lord Hermer, Richard Hermer, has been accused of, well, in fact, he spoke to the BBC about two-tier policing in this country and said that it isn't a thing and that we shouldn't talk about it because it is offensive. Well, Scotland Yard has been accused of two-tier justice after police apparently ignored a pro-Palestinian protester dressed as a Holocaust concentration camp inmate. I saw this going around social media. Unsurprisingly, Jewish leaders and some MPs have criticised the religiously aggravated outfit worn by someone called Maria Galastier, in which she replaced the Star of David worn by inmates of concentration and death camps with an Islamic symbol. I mean, tasteless in the extreme, doesn't even begin to cover it.
Yeah, completely tasteless. And I think he has, this woman is a woman, even though it's like a man, who has been arrested. The two-tier policing seems really clear to me, and I'm sure all of your listeners and viewers, just in terms of there is a woman who did something horrendous around the riots this time last year, and who's still in prison and has been in prison for 30 months for saying we should burn mosques. And what she said is obviously completely wrong. But there are people that have said exactly the same about synagogues, about churches, and they haven't even been arrested. There's a former professor from a British university who spends his whole time talking about the danger of Zionism, naming schools, naming people like me and Jewish celebrities. He's called me a genocidaire, which means that I am myself am committing genocide. And the police doing absolutely nothing about this man. So for me, there is complete and utter two-tier policing. And that kind of goes back into what we're talking about with Palestine Action, which it's time that we recognise that it's not just coming from one side. It's much easier to see it from the right, or it's much easier to see it if it is anti-Islamic, if people are saying, let's go and march on mosques. But somehow they can't see it when people are talking about Zionism, or they're talking about Jews, or when they're talking about Christians. And I just see that, again, I see that as deeply worrying for our country so much. There's this idea that Jews are the canary in the coal mine, in terms of when in the times of the miners, they would send a canary in a coal mine down, and if there was a poison in the atmosphere, the canary would die, and that would show that there was something dangerous. And it's very scary being that canary, because I see these dangers all around, and I think probably lots of people can see it now. They see two-tier policing.
And it's so clear as well with Palestine Action. I mean, they're about to be prescribed as a terrorist group. We also have the Telegraph newspaper has done some very good work uncovering a meeting, a sort of Zoom chat that they had. I don't know if it was Zoom, but a sort of that kind of video chat affair. Tactics discussed by Palestine Action included more of these kind of attacks, breaking into factories, hitting everything you can find with a sledgehammer, as well as setting up anonymous cells, being able to target more military bases without detection. They're talking about 3 more RAF bases, recommending action against defence companies believed to be supplying arms to Israel, including a drone factory in Leicester. These people are not going to stop, and we have a member of Parliament from the UK Parliament who yesterday I gave him, someone calculated, I didn't count as many as there were, but there were over 10 opportunities. I think someone counted 14 opportunities that I gave him to either condemn it or to say that what Palestine Action did at RAF Bryce Norton is wrong. It's really concerning that that's the case.
It's frightening, and he's not the only one, which is even more frightening. And talking, because we're talking about kneecap later, but there was someone from Palestine Action who was speaking on a stage at Glastonbury last night, So it shows that there are forces that are trying to create this radicalization within our own country. There are people in Parliament that are unbelievably are favouring vandals who are attacking our arms. And although they might say it's about Israel, it isn't. Palestine Action has been working in Belgium, and they've been attacking weapons that are meant to be helping the defence of Ukraine. So this is about the arms industry. Now, in an ideal, peaceful world, there would be no need for an arms industry. We would all live in peace and happiness. But sadly, that is not the world we live in. And what we are seeing is that we are living in an increasingly dangerous world. We are seeing people like Putin who are invading a European country, who's threatened other European countries, who's threatened our own country, killed people within our own country. And these people are working against us and working against our defence. And frankly, it's really staggering. And it's staggering that anyone from any political party should be allowed to say this. And really, I think Keir Starmer should take the whip away from anyone who stands up for Palestine Action.
It's interesting as well that Glastonbury founder Sir Michael Eavis, like the Mayor of London, City Canon Knight of the Realm, has hit out at critics following the row over the festival's plans to host Kneecap, the controversial rappers. Nicole, I know you're a trained journalist who knows the law. We're obviously going to be careful over the charges that have been brought against one member of Kneecap, a terrorism charge, but the general point is, of course, that Kneecap have said all sorts of things not related to the court action that are deeply offensive to many people. And I just wonder whether you think they should A, be on the Glastonbury stage, and B, whether the BBC should be beaming it out to our homes at 4 o'clock this afternoon and on highlights programmes.
Yeah, well, I think just to bring back Palestine Action and Kneecap, the point with both of them is they're not doing a thing to help the people of Palestine. What's going on in Palestine? There's a horrendous war going on. People are hungry and people are homeless. And that is because of a terrorist organization called Hamas. So when you have people that appear to support Hamas or Hezbollah as well, who are a group that are in the north, they're in Lebanon, and who are actively anti-Palestinian, Hezbollah, then these are people that are not interested in helping the Palestinian cause. So yesterday, Kneecap put out a thing about saying it's not about us, it's about the people of Palestine, which is absolute rubbish. So in some ways, it's sad that we're talking about them. I think actually myself banning them from Glastonbury just makes them more into martyrs, makes people more interested in them. So I think show them, and I think perhaps Michael Eavis, to go back to the original message of Glastonbury, which is of peace and no politics, he should say that this to them and to everyone else. We don't want politics on here. We want an inclusive festival, and we just don't want any of that. But as Kneecap probably will say something political, I don't think the BBC should be showing them, because I don't want my licence fee money to be going towards people that are obviously hateful towards me and you and all of us that don't support terrorist groups.
Wouldn't it be nice if Glastonbury, I know there's been a couple of things done, you've highlighted them on your social media, I think, Nicole, I think I saw it last night, but wouldn't it be nice if they held, I don't know, a minute's silence for people who were also young people, eager, nice people who wanted to go to a music festival, enjoy themselves, and instead, on the 7th of October, they were raped, mutilated, taken as hostages, murdered by Hamas terrorists. I think that's something Glastonbury should strongly consider, rather than bringing people to the stage who would minimise what happened on the 7th of October.
You're so right, and this is one of the saddest things for me, and I think for almost every Jew, that the music world turned its back on October 7 to what happened at the Nova Festival. The Nova Festival was a trance festival. People were going and they were dancing, and it turned into an absolute massacre. Nearly 400 people were murdered and raped and gunned down simply for dancing. They were all unarmed. There were 20 people out of the 50 hostages still being held in Gaza. Around 20 of them are alive, and 9 of them are Nova survivors. This week, I've been speaking to the parents of some of them. There's one called Alon Ohel. He's a musician himself. He's a brilliant pianist. You'll be able to find his stuff on YouTube. He still has shrapnel in one of his eyes, so he's going blind at the moment. 3 of the released hostages that came out that the ones that people will maybe remember because they came out looking like Holocaust survivors. They were severely emaciated and clearly hadn't been outside for months. And they were being held with him. He is now being held alone. I spoke to his mother, and she'd heard from the other hostages that one of the ways he's keeping himself alive is he plays his piano on his arm, or he plays the drums. He's still trying to think about music. So for anyone in the music world, music should be a time where we come together. I went to the Live Aid musical a few weeks ago, and that is about the world coming together to help people. So even if you want to say we want peace for the people of Israel and peace for the people of Palestine, peace for the people of Iran and all these countries, but instead what we're seeing is hundreds of thousands of Palestine flags. There was an event last night where people were having their Palestine flags and singing From the River to the Sea. So this is not only very one-sided, but it's radicalization.
It's racist. It's racist as well. If anybody has any curiosity or any doubts or any thoughts or any kind of wanting to know about what happened at the Nova Festival, brilliant documentary, Emmy-winning, rightfully won an Emmy this week, called We Will Dance Again. You can get it on the BBC iPlayer. It's one of the few things the BBC has actually done, although it was another company that made it. Highly recommend watching that. Just before you go, Nicole, I just want to mention something. This is a doctor that's put online about the British Medical Association conference. 45 motions at their conference on the Middle East. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would imagine that not only Jewish members of the Doctors' Union have told the Telegraph that they feel intimidated and unsafe after these motions at the BMA conference, but also, shouldn't they be discussing healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that we have quite a few problems with healthcare in this country. The NHS is in complete doldrums. There are millions of things they could be talking about. And this is a bit like, I think I've talked to you before about the National Education Union and the BMA, although it sounds official, it is just the union. Yeah. All of these unions have been completely taken over by people who hate Israel, and to the point where it's all they want to talk about. And there's so much that needs to be talked about the NHS, about the world of doctors, and even if you want to talk about positive stuff, AI, all of this. But instead they're concentrating on a war that has nothing to do with them. And I had a similar, I wrote about a similar event, which is the British Psychiatrists Union. They had a meeting in Wales, and there was a whole thing there about Israel, Palestine, and not about the trauma and things like that could actually be useful, but it was a call to arms for how to use your work to help the cause and also to ignore Jewish trauma. It basically said you shouldn't allow the weaponization of trauma. And this is psychiatrists. So all of this is absolutely staggering and all goes to make Jews like me feel like, do we have a future in this country?
Well, it sounds as if some people do need their head examined. Nicole, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. That is Nicole Lampert, there, a journalist who covers all these matters, and really, really interesting. I wonder what you think about what she has said. 0344 499 1000. Nick has been in touch and says, so that idiot MP doesn't condemn breaking into a military base and vandalising an aircraft, yet I bet he's the same idiot who condemned Lucy Connolly. What an absolute idiot, says Nick. Idiot appears to be the word of the day. Amanda says, I'm not surprised you haven't read out my text regarding Glastonbury, but it was rather long, but I sincerely hope you might remind people of the horrors which took place at another music festival in 2023. We should never forget, says Amanda in London. And yes, I've actually just done that by coincidence. I didn't even see your message beforehand, but certainly the Nova Music Festival is something I think Glastonbury should be doing something to commemorate, even if it's just a minute's silence or some sort of attempt to remember it properly. There were, I think I did see a yellow ribbon for the hostages. There are 50 hostages that are still being held, as Nicole was mentioning there, yet still they seem to want to talk about Hamas and Hezbollah and support, not for the Palestinian, I mean, I support the Palestinian people. I want the Palestinian people to be free of Hamas. Lots more to discuss. We will talk about this big change in terms of hand luggage. Loads of people, of course, going on holiday in the next few weeks. You might be getting your 10 days away in Spain or wherever, and the hand luggage rules are changing. Airlines will not be allowed to charge passengers any additional fees for carrying hand luggage on board. The doyen of travel journalists in this country, Simon Cowell, is standing by to tell us all about it. Simon Calder, not Simon Cowell. Simon Cowell's not standing by. Simon Calder is standing by. But I can tell you, Calder certainly has the X factor. Stay with us.
To send all the terrorists and scumbags off to. We need to resurrect something like that, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's an Ascension Island or in the middle of nowhere. That's what we need, because frankly, whether it's the asylum seekers, the bogus asylum seekers who are almost exclusively fighting age men coming over here, or whether it's any of the other wrong-uns that we've got in this country, I don't know about you, I am so tired of having to live around these people. I want them deported, I want them arrested, and I want us to go back to having a nice, calm, civilized society again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the EU, which of course we're not part of, has voted to adopt a proposal that will allow air passengers to bring a personal item into the cabin and a piece of hand luggage of up to 7 kilograms free of charge. It's the EU that's doing this, but if you're flying to or from the EU, this could well affect you, and many of us, of course, are. I was in France earlier this month. I know a load of people will be going on holiday when the school holidays hit in a couple of weeks' time. Let's get the detail on this from Simon Calder. He is the travel journalist for The Independent. Simon, it's great to see you. Where do you find yourself today? Apparently on a train there?
Yeah, I'm on the Flughafen Express, Peter, which is slightly running late, which is why I'm not in a stable position. But as you can see, things are racing along quite nicely. I've just flown into beautiful Munich on Lufthansa, and on Lufthansa, as with many of the so-called legacy airlines like British Airways, you are allowed not just your personal backpack, which I've got, but also a piece of wheel-along luggage which you can bring into the cabin. Now, that's entirely up to Lufthansa. If I'm on Ryanair, of course, or Wizz Air or EasyJet, then the only thing I get is my free baggage here. But the European Parliament, can you believe, says that it is a basic human right.
A basic human right, wow.
Be able to take two pieces. Yes, like gender, freedom of speech, being able to take 2 pieces of cabin baggage is apparently on the same page. So extraordinary that they've done this, but they are very, very keen on doing this. So everyone's got very excited, thinking, great, I'll be able to take all my luggage and I won't need to pay for it. Well, before you think that, let me mention a couple of other things. First one is that just because European Parliament is going to rubber stamp this, here we have the lady with the tickets. Thank you. Guten Tag. Sorry, I wasn't expecting her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dankeschön. Sorry about that.
I think that's the first time we've had a ticket inspector.
European Parliament votes for it.
I think that's the first time we've had a ticket inspector with Simon Calder. I mean, I've seen you in some different places, Simon, but certainly the ticket inspector is something that I think is new. Sorry, tell us more about this.
Yeah, so just because the European Parliament is going to rubber stamp this in the autumn and say, yep, we've got to do this, doesn't mean it's going to happen. There is then going to be what's called a trilogue. Have you heard of that? It's basically a talking shop where all the individual nations get together and say, yeah, we think this is great, or actually this is a terrible idea. Italy and Spain, where they are coming up with the idea that basic human right to take 2 pieces of cabin baggage, they are very much going to be in favour of this. But countries with good airlines like Ireland, home of Ryanair, are going to say this is a terrible idea because, well, you can kind of see what happens, Peter, at an airport where you've got everybody bringing 2 bits of cabin baggage on. You would have been in this position, I'm sure. You've been on more flights than anybody. It's a big kerfuffle. You can't get them all in. Some people have to check them in. The budget airlines say, look, we'll give you a small piece of baggage. In fact, Ryanair says that, EasyJet says that only 2 out of 5 passengers will take just this backpack, and that's up to them. And everybody else can check it in or not. So you'd be removing choice. You'd be effectively giving something. But I tell you what, the airlines have something to answer for as well, because if I buy a really cheap fare, something like 20 quid to get from London to Belfast or something, then I'm also going to find that if I want to bring a roll-along bag, then I am going to be paying.
Well, I find that, Simon, I find that on a number of occasions. You think you're getting a decent flight, and it's actually cheaper to go from, with maybe a more expensive airline. I find myself comparing the two. I live in London, and I'm comparing airports. Is it cheaper to go from Heathrow, for example, where you get a bit of a bag with British Airways? Is it cheaper to go with EasyJet from Gatwick or Stansted or Luton or whatever? It's a very interesting dilemma, so things will be changing. Very interesting one there. Simon, who's holding your camera? Is anyone holding the camera? What's happening there?
No, look, I've got a very important piece of technical equipment, Peter. This is a secret I'm going to let you into. I've got a rubber band, and I've hooked it round to one of those posts that stand up on trains. So that's why you've got hopefully reasonably stable picture, even if you haven't got a particularly stable backdrop with quite a lot of comings and goings.
Very, very stable. Much like Donald Trump, you're a very stable genius, Simon. Thank you. Really enjoyed hearing not just the detail of that, but if you didn't see it, if you're listening on the radio, I highly urge you to go back on YouTube and look at the feed there, because it was borderline chaotic, and Simon just kept talking. He's an absolute pro, and he just kept talking through that. They had a stop, they had a ticket inspector, they had people walking in front of his camera. He's on a train in Munich in Germany, and I mean, that was just vintage broadcasting there. He's a total pro, is old Calder, so thank you to him for that. And of course things will be changing in regard to the kind of cabin baggage that you can bring on. On reparations, people still getting in touch, lots to discuss, and there's plenty of time to get your point across. 27 minutes, in fact, between now and 1 o'clock. So let me know your thoughts on 0344 499 1000. Mel in Fife has sent a text on 87222 with the word talk in her text. Jamaica wanting 18 trillion in reparations. That's 6.3 million per person. I think I'll move there before it happens, says Mel in Fife. And Frank Etchells in Bingley in West Yorkshire says, Peter, when I joined the current company last year, part of my induction was an awareness of modern day slavery and how to bring it to light. The presentation stated that there were an estimated 42 million modern day slaves in the world. We need to sort out today's problems, because slavery has not ended and many people are unwittingly complicit in its perpetuation. Reparations for the past are a distraction from the present. Good show, Peter. P.S. If you show the clip of Richard Bergen again, I will have no lips left to bite, says Frank. It was a little bit excruciating. Let's hear a couple more voice notes. Let's hear from Trevor.
Hi, Peter. I'm failing to understand when we have a government that says the NHS needs more money because it's failing. How does that relate to if a hospital isn't performing, we're going to take money off it? That I just can't get my head around that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they're still working this out, Trevor, to be brutally frank. And certainly what is happening is that they're saying that you, on the basis of your patient experience, will be asked, should the hospital get the full fee? So if you get something like a hip replacement, let's say that costs £10,000, and you say, right, yeah, do you know what, hospital did a great job, full 10 grand, off you go. Well, 10 grand will then be given to the hospital. That full fee will be paid into the hospital's budget. If you say, no, it was dreadful, it was terrible, didn't work, wasn't good, wasn't the right thing, well then they would get most of it. They would get £9,000 out of that hypothetical £10,000, but that extra 1,000 would then go into an improvement fund where they would say, right, we're going to have a centralised fund here, which then says, how do we improve lots of different areas? There are lots of worries about this, Trevor. There are lots of people in the healthcare kind of world who are saying, well, actually, what's going to happen is the bad places are going to get worse, and the good places that don't actually need extra money are going to get extra money that they don't necessarily need. So it's an interesting one. And also, should patients actually be the arbiters of this? Do we know if we've had a good experience or not? And also, when do you actually give that opinion? I mean, you would know if you went into A&E, you break your arm, do they patch it up? Have you got a sling? Does your arm get better? Yeah, fine. But what about, we all know people who will give a negative review just because they'll give a negative review because they're that kind of person. We know people who will have a problem with, I don't know, car parking, or they don't like a particular doctor or nurse or something who they meet. Is that actually to do with the quality of their care? Well, is that something that they could criticise a hospital on? There'll also be other people who'll give glowing reviews of the NHS and say they're wonderful, marvellous angels and incredible people who do an amazing job, all of them. The answer is that not all of them are excellent, and we shouldn't always be grateful to the NHS for everything because we pay for it. We pay a huge amount of money through taxation. We should get a much better service than we already get. There are, of course, good bits of the NHS, absolutely no doubt about that, but there are some pretty terrible ones as well. So it's a big issue. There's going to be a lot on this, and I'm going to talk to Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, about it tomorrow. Let's get a couple more voice notes just before the break. Firstly, from Nick.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick from Loughborough. I think what we're seeing now in the Labour Party is the left-wing assassins quietly lining up on the sidelines, ready to pounce. It's planned all along, and it won't be long before we have a real, as if Starmer isn't left-wing enough, we'll end up with Angela Rayner or Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell or Richard Bergen. All these people are going to be either in the top job or in the cabinet on a very far left ticket. Have a good day, Peter.
Richard Bergen as Prime Minister. Nick, you know how to give me nightmares. David has a voice note as well on non-crime hate incidents. We've been talking about this today as well.
Hi, Peter. Great show, as always. David from the Cotswolds. About this non-crime hate crime, non-crime, that's not a crime. Anyway, about that. Have you seen the state of the police force? Just have a quick glance around and have a look at them. Talk about diversity hire gone mad. The non-crime hate thing is about all they can handle. It is ridiculous.
Well, thank you very much indeed, David. And yes, I agree with you. I never remember what they're called as well, arguably because they're so ridiculous, and I think I want to forget them. I should say just very quickly before the break, my friend Lee Scott, who I was speaking to every day, I did a series of shows, I think I did 5 shows in a row last week, and I spoke to Lee every day about what was happening in Israel. Just to update you, he's back in the UK. He's had an MRI on his arm. He had a problem. He was caught up in one of the attacks that was happening. Iranian missiles were coming into Israel and going in the opposite direction as well. He's had an MRI on his arm. It's broken, and he will have to recover from that. But he's home. He's delighted to be home. And in fact, we're going to be catching up with him tomorrow on the programme between 10 and 1. So we've got a load of people on tomorrow, actually. Helen Whately, who is from the Conservatives. She's a front bencher for them, shadow cabinet minister. We've got Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. We've got questions for Wes Streeting. Feel free to send them in, and we will make sure we ask as many of those as we can. Also, as I say, Lee Scott is going to be joining us tomorrow as well. We'll get an update from him. Lots still to discuss, including the veterans waiting 13 years, yes, really, to seek help for post-traumatic stress disorder. They've served our country, they remembered us, they were there for us when we needed them. Why aren't we there for them? Why isn't the NHS and all the psychiatric services there for them when they need it? We'll find out next here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jason in the Lake District, who has said Simon Calder has just delivered the best section of broadcasting ever seen on any platform. It was pretty crazy. If you are on YouTube or if you go to talk.tv, you can look back and you can always watch the show anytime. You can watch these shows, you can listen to them as well, of course. You can have a look. If you're listening, I strongly urge you after the show in 22 minutes time, go online, have a look back at Simon Calder, and that was just his comedy, and he absolutely just kept broadcasting. He was a total pro. He was asked for his ticket, people were walking past him, the train was shuddering to a halt. I was quite struggling to keep a straight face. There's one thing we can do, if you sometimes notice when you're watching, you'll see me on one side of the screen and our guest on the other side of the screen. Very occasionally I'll say to the people behind the scenes, can you take the guest full screen, you know, if I need to, I don't know, scratch my head or something like that. I don't want to distract people, but on that occasion it was mainly because I was trying not to laugh. Thank you also, on a much more serious note, to the person who has messaged me to say kneecap shouldn't be anywhere near a public platform, never mind Glastonbury. Shame on the BBC. Once again, almost anything on the left, even the far left, like these muppets calling for the murder of MPs. I hate what this country has become. Shane says, Pete, I miss you and Dave's chocolate taste test from a few years back. I miss them too. Give Jack a hug, mate, says Shane in Sydney. What a lovely message. Also, just to flag that on Friday, we're going to have a very special show at 9 o'clock on this station, because Friday the 4th of July, of course, marking 1 year since Labour's landslide victory. To commemorate the occasion, Talk has put together a 1-hour special looking back at Keir Starmer's first 12 months. It's called 1 Year of Chaos, and it airs on Friday the 4th of July, that's next Friday, at 9 o'clock, and I'm contributing to that, as are many of your favourite presenters as well. Right then, I want to talk about veterans, because we try on this show to talk about veterans as much as possible, because there are always so many issues, and we know that loads of military families listen to, watch this, people who've served in uniform, people who are retired, people who are serving in uniform, who text in, sometimes anonymously, talking about what's happening in the army. One really interesting thing is about PTSD, and Combat Stress, which is the one of the organisations that helps an awful lot of people in this regard, has urged the public to rethink recovery. PTSD Awareness Day today, highlighting long-term psychological tools of military service. I think we've some degree of understanding about post-traumatic stress disorder, but what really worried me is how long people are waiting, and specifically veterans are waiting for this. Some of them are waiting 13 years for PTSD counselling. Well, I know that my next guest, Claire Hurrell, who's an Army veteran, waited 3 years. That's 3 years too long, Claire. That 3 years must have been incredibly difficult for you. Can you tell me your story? And thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there. Just tell us your story.
Hi, yes. So I was diagnosed with PTSD back in 2017, but this had been after a very long journey, getting passed around the posts from NHS, oh, we can't help you, you're a veteran, to various other organisations, and eventually Combat Stress were the ones who said they could help me.
Why would the NHS not help you? Surely being a veteran would put you, one would think, to the top of the queue, because we know that veterans are prioritised for other things, or should be, and certainly the level of trauma that you will have had because of your military service will have been something that, okay, you may need a specialist to deal with, but nonetheless we have a real duty as a country to help people like you, Claire.
Absolutely. So my issues started before all the current day ops that the NHS have got, and I was just quite bluntly told, you're a veteran, we cannot help you.
That's outrageous, Claire. Tell us about your experience, and if you can talk about it, tell us about what actually traumatised you.
That's something I can't talk about,
That's
Peter.
okay. That's okay.
Not just for myself, but I don't want to actually trigger anybody else that could potentially be watching.
And I want to be really careful about that. But I think it's probably safe to say in a general way, Claire, that you served this country, you served it bravely and served it very well, and that left you clearly with a number of serious issues. How are you now?
Thanks to Combat Stress, I am living my day-to-day life very well at the moment. I still have some very extremely dark days, but the tools that Combat Stress gave me to learn how to cope has been magnificent, and I can live a relatively normal life now, Peter.
What do you think it says about our society, Claire, that people are waiting 13 years having served our country? You waited 3 years, and as you say, were sent from pillar to post.
It was only 3 years waiting for diagnosis, Peter, so my issues started many, many years before that. But I don't want to do the I'm a female thing, but because I hadn't served on the front line, I didn't think I was worthy to reach out for help. And it wasn't until I reached out to Combat Stress that they made me believe that I did deserve it. So that's just one factor that I faced internally. So there will be many, many other people out there like me who didn't serve on the front line, so they don't think they deserve help from these charities.
So what was the nature of the service that I'm not asking about what traumatized you, but you were working you were in a support role, perhaps?
Yes, I was in a support role, so I was a military clerk, which, depending on where you are and what you do, it can lead to some very traumatic events. I mean, I take nothing away from those boys and girls that have served on the front line, but sometimes it can be equally as hard back home. I mean, there is one thing I don't mind talking about, and that is being part of what they call the casualty visiting officer teams. It's where you knock on the doors of families and you ruin their lives with the bad news.
So you deliver the news that someone hasn't made it?
I did that many times, Peter, yeah. And when I became a mother myself, the enormity of those days, for which I'd had no training, I received no counselling after, it hit home. It really hit home.
That is really grim, Claire, and I'm so sorry to hear that you haven't been given the support you needed. I know Combat Stress has helped you. How can the public help? How can people who haven't served a day in uniform like me, someone who would run away from danger rather than running towards it, like people like you and others did in uniform, How can we help? How can we be more understanding? How can we put pressure on politicians, on the NHS, on different organisations to make sure that people like you, Claire, get the help you need?
Well, firstly, support the charities. As soon as the different ops that the NHS established, combat stress funding was cut by a phenomenal amount. Without funding, these charities cannot continue the fantastic work that they do. We need to get the funding back.
Claire, I wish you well, and I hope that things get better for you. I know you're doing
really good, thank you.
Well, you're doing really well, and I mean, you've come on national TV to talk about the hardest thing and around the issues around the hardest things that have ever happened to you.
Can I just say something else?
Go ahead.
On the back of my treatment from combat stress, I've gone on to build my own business, and I've.
Brilliant. What have you done, Claire?
So my business is called The Crafty Black Dog, and I now produce military giftware, and I incorporated the name of the black dog, otherwise known as depression for people that don't know, into the business name. And now I started this 5 years ago after learning about art therapy, and I started it as a little hobby at my kitchen table. And I'm very proud to say on Thursday just gone at the ex-British Forces in Business Awards, I've just won Entrepreneur of the Year.
Brilliant. Well, many congratulations on that. What's your website?
It's www.thecraftyblackdog.co.uk, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without combat stress.
Thecraftyblackdog.co.uk. And what can you get on there? Tell us a little bit about what you can buy.
So it's all sorts of military giftware, from mugs to decanters to old-fashioned war shields, regimental ties, just a vast array of gifts, and I am so proud of it.
Well, well done. You should be very proud of it, and very proud of yourself as well, Claire. I'm definitely going to go on that website after the show and have a look, and maybe even a few purchases. Christmas isn't too far away. That is thecraftyblackdog.co.uk, and thank you so much to Claire Hurrell there, who's an army veteran, speaking about that. I mean, Claire is such an inspiration, but it's such a disgrace as well as a country that it takes so long to get these people the help they need after they've served us. We'll get your views on this and everything else in just a few minutes here on Talk.
to send all the terrorists and scumbags off to. We need to resurrect something like that, whether it's in Rwanda, whether it's an Ascension Island or in the middle of nowhere. That's what we need, because frankly, whether it's the asylum seekers, the bogus asylum seekers who are almost exclusively fighting age men coming over here, or whether it's any of the other wrong-uns that we've got in this country, I don't know about you, I am so tired of having to live around these people. I want them deported, I want them arrested, and I want us to go back to having a nice, calm, civilised society again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dave's been in touch from Dorset and he says, regarding PTSD, Peter, my diagnosis came in 1992 but stems back to 1973 and after, during the Falklands War, when PTSD didn't have a title as such. My second diagnosis was triggered last year. PTSD doesn't just affect the person suffering. Don't forget the direct family too. Much more so my wife. I served from 1971 to 1996 in the Royal Navy, retired Falklands veteran Dave from Dorset. Dave, thank you. I'm sorry you went through all of that. Thank you for your service to this country, and I hope you now have the help you need, and every good wish to you and your wife. Let's hear some voice notes. Here is Nick on reparations.
Hi, Nick from Bristol here. Give them the money, then take it back to pay for the cost of all the tens of thousands of naval personnel who went around the world to stop the slavery. End of story. We owe them nothing.
Sarah's thoughts on reparations now?
Good morning, Peter. It's Sarah from Croydon in Surrey. Just in response to what Matthew was saying there about if the government is harming people, then we should get reparations. I'd like reparations from Labour, please, and the previous Conservative government, because they're harming me. My standard of living is going down and down and down because of all the costs going up and up and up because of the decisions that they've made. So I'd like reparations, please, because I am struggling to pay my bills and I'm going into my overdraft. I'm self-employed and yeah, I'd like some help, please. Many thanks. Great show as always.
Sarah, thank you. You're one of the people who does deserve a bit of extra cash because you're part of the backbone of this country, self-employed, trying to get through things, and you're dipping into your savings. I don't think you're going to get reparations from Labour, but I absolutely understand the sentiment, let me tell you. Lisa has been in touch about Islamophobia.
Hi Peter, it's Lisa from Canterbury. I'm sick of hearing about all these things like Islamophobia, homophobia. What is a phobia? It's a fear of, isn't it? Which is, you know, really something that the government, the law, the courts, when they start deciding all this stuff about Islamophobia, they need to take in the reality and what it actually physically means. Now, I don't have a fear of Islamophobia or homophobia, anything like that, but I have a right to an opinion. And what they're trying to do is label people with a phobia, which means that they're racist about certain people, and that is clearly not the case at all. That actual term, Islamophobia, is not a correct term. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. I think I agree with a lot of what you say. Also, think of the words of the comedian Peter Kay, who said homophobia, it's a terrible thing. It must be awful to be afraid of where you live. Michael's been in touch about school complaints.
Afternoon, Peter. Regarding these school complaints, maybe it's because all the middle-class parents, the ones who want the best for their kids and can no longer afford private school fees, are complaining for better teaching for their children. Just saying.
It's a fair point. Dawn has been in touch on reparations.
Morning, Peter. If Matthew is that concerned about reparations, why doesn't he set up a standing order and he can send that to Jamaica every month if it makes him feel better? Cheers.
Judith on reparations now.
Hi Peter, Judith here from Radlett. To use a very famous phrase, or rather to misquote a very famous phrase, reparations may vary. I'll leave it at that. Great show, Peter.
Well done, Judith. You've made me smile there. Thank you also to Sophia, who says what an amazing, inspiring and brave lady Claire is. The lady we spoke to earlier who has PTSD. Sending her so much love and thoughts. I will definitely be going on our website to purchase something. The treatment of our veterans is absolutely shameful. We need to help and do our bit, as the government is a joke and doesn't do anything. Thank you to Dan and Kent as well. He says the viewers on Talk are so fantastic, and Simon Calder equals what an absolute legend. Have a fantastic rest for your Saturday, Peter and team, and prepare for another barrage of messages tomorrow. Please go back and look at the Simon Calder thing. It's amazing. Leslie as well says, hi Peter. My